We're at the new education agency facilities in Barre, Vermont. We've had a very nice tour this morning. Thank you, Carol, and all of the staff for seeing how this wonderful new facility is going to work for the agency. It really seems quite impressive. So it's nice. So we have a regular agenda, and we'll start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I get confused too which arm to put up.
Pen in my other hand.
Are there members of the public here today that wish to be heard? Not seeing any, we will move on to board updates. John Marie.
I was at the Standards Board last Friday, and the entire meeting was spent on, well, the morning half of the meeting was spent on articulating the motion that they had made the month prior in terms of the relicensing renewal, and they were articulating what the statements in the motions, the bullets were, because there, as I pointed out at the last meeting, there was a motion made and passed, and then Rebecca, along with the Standards Board, sent out a joint press release, and there was some discussion on making it clearer. So there is yet another press release after the last meeting, and there was discussion about the relicensings of level 1 and level 2. So they spent the whole meeting trying to work on this so that it can start going through the process for the way that the rulemaking similar to ours for the changes. And that's it.
Okay. Krista.
So last Tuesday, I went to a public hearing from the Ways and Means and the House Ed Committee, and offered testimony, but listened to testimony, and it's just interesting for the bill. I had 34 that were supporting and 21 against the bill, and it was pretty much for the support. A lot of the support was coming from superintendents, various school board members. One from Bolton was talking about how he's one board member. For him, it's one board member for every 14 students, and just how small that is, and the challenges of being a small school and being on their own. There was also support coming from some of the business offices and talking about some of the complications that you have when you have multiple districts operating within the supervisory union, keeping the book straight, and then even decision making, how that is harder to do. And then the 21 against, I'd say, thank you. The largest complaint was local control, and that was coming from various board members. I thought it was interesting, the people that were missing maybe from this were parents. So there was only one parent that came, and they were supporting the bill and saying they want a strong governance system. And the people that were against it, it was mostly focusing around that local control and power piece. So it was just an interesting dynamic. And I basically just read the statement that we had passed at our previous meeting, and then it was very short. It was 2 minutes. So.
And I should explain that normally in a situation like that, the chair of the board would have gone, and I was unable to go, so I asked Krista to attend in my place, and I got several unsolicited reports that she did a wonderful job. So next time there's a public hearing like that, I think she, yes.
Well, they were surprised that it wasn't Bill. So they were just like, "Oh, this is a different face to the state board." I did get a couple of comments in that direction.
Well, I'm going to let that go.
So am I.
Other comments from board members?
Yeah, last night Bill and I attended basically an Addison County-wide meeting that was pulled together by the executive committee from the Addison Northwest Supervisory Union, and there was a number of legislators there. Dave Sharp from Ways and Means is a member of that legislative community of that neighborhood. And so there was I believe all three SUs represented, and one from Rutland Northeast was represented as well. And a lot of the same themes that Krista mentioned were mentioned last night. And in talking with Steve Dale from Vermont School Board Association on the way out, I asked him if what we heard last night was what the common message has been out there, both pro and con, and in fact, he said it was. And so I think the message is out there. I think we've turned the soil. Now it's a matter of seeing what we can do to move forward with some positive, constructive movement towards change.
Other members wish to make comments? I'll just give a very brief report. Obviously, this issue of governance has taken a fair amount of my time this month. I'm on the phone and emailing and talking with a lot of the players, including the School Board Association and the Superintendent's Association. So I've kept abreast and tried to make sure that we were as involved as possible. I've written an op-ed piece that it's appeared in the Brattleboro Reformer, and I think a couple of other pieces expressing the state board's strong support for this legislation. So I've stayed involved in it. Lachlan.
I forgot to mention this space, but I think March 28th, I was part of a roundtable discussion at the School Board Association about student governance, the role of student governance on school boards. Probably 4 or 5 superintendents were there, one principal, and probably 6 or 7 other students, and some school board members as well. And then, so we discussed basically how to improve communications between students and school boards. And then I also spent the afternoon in the State House talking to several representatives about A83, mostly the Windham County delegation. So.
Which there doesn't seem to be a lot of support in the Windham County delegation, so.
No, it was a tough couple hours in the State House. Got beat up a lot.
But we're not done. Any other comments from board members? If not, Bill, legislative report, if you could just recap the general report, and then we'll get into the more important brief statements that you all developed.
Yes,
Just for the record that we have something for this morning's
we
meeting.
talked about a bunch of bills. Any questions? Briefly, we spent some time reviewing the hot legislative items led by Jill Remick, and appreciate her assistance, and actually she carried the ball on that, so it's more than assistance. But privatization, the tax rate, had some discussion about that, small schools grant, and cost shifts that are going there. The miscellaneous education bill, also with some emphasis on dual enrollment and how this affects private schools and religious schools. That's basically in the retired teachers plan and the transition to Green Mountain Care. We also discuss, and the answer to a lot of these questions is we don't know yet, but the implications budgetarily and otherwise are going to be huge. We spent a huge amount of time, or the greater part of the time, talking about the consolidation bill. And what you see is the informal working group on the board behind you in terms of belief statements. And Rebecca, would you mind talking about the left-hand side there? These are the bullet points, and I'll frame this a little bit more, is that at this point, the bill is passed House Ed and Ways and Means and on its way back to House Ed and the Rules Committee and Appropriations and what have you. And it's going to be in flux. But there's some statements of principle and so forth that we believe need to be conveyed, and issues that need to be addressed. And we thought that it would be good to put these not as a position statement, but issues of some importance that need to be addressed as we move forward. Rebecca, you want to work down the list?
Sure.
Will commits, will help.
So as Bill said, these are really hopefully core commitments that the board has articulated, and these were pulled from the conversation we had, and we can discuss them as we go through, that our principles we hope will be evident in whatever comes out, both of the work of the legislature and the board. And the first is to spend some time defining appropriate roles for boards, community councils, superintendents, and principals, so that there's clarity in whatever model comes out about what the roles and responsibilities of each of those actors are. Does anyone want to comment on that? Or should we keep going?
Why don't you go through the list and then we'll,
The next is a strong commitment to equity, and we were careful to clarify that that is both financial and educational equity, so both what's going in and what's coming out, hopefully.
one, contrary to what I just said, I
You're
think.
waiving your own rule.
I know. I think that might be helpful if we're gonna go with that one, to put educational in front of financial, just so no one misreads that the motivation was financial.
Okay. Can go do that?
I'll do that.
No,
Okay.
just,
That'd be
I'm
good.
close enough.
Yep. And then the next one was to really pick up on some of the work that you've already endorsed, but to put in there was a strong sense that we don't want to do any kind of change without really addressing this whole issue of how we know that we're getting the results we hope for. So to put strong support behind the idea of implementing the education quality review process that we've already articulated and discussed here in this context. There's a strong belief that we need to address issues of representation and balancing interests of small and large districts. There's a sense that we need clear goals and clarity about who gets students to those goals. There's a sense that the pay for their own choices, we never fully finished defining that, but do you want to speak to that, Bill?
The nature of the discussion was between school equity that may be happening here, and that a more affluent district or a community may have certain values that others wouldn't. And how do you balance these things off? And how do you assure equity between schools at the same time? And you have individual variation, but does this necessarily mean differences in equal opportunities? And if you're in an affluent place which wants to pay for the gifted and talented program or whatever, but then another school does not, then how do you pay for these things, and how do you make sure this is equitable? A whole set of issues which get into what is the nature of your community, what's the nature of equity, what's the nature of your quality of programs.
Which gets back to the education quality standards, and how do we make sure, or what system is in place to assure that all the school districts are providing opportunities, which
Right.
Rebecca addressed in the last
Right, and if he
in the
wants to.
last meeting.
And I think what you're talking about with EQS is there's a baseline that all should get, but I think what this is doing also is going beyond that baseline.
Right,
How, for the communities that want to spend more,
right.
how is it considered equal? How do you factor in the equity piece if they want to spend more for their kids without having to share?
And I'm not sure pay for your own choices is the right way to frame it. So maybe that doesn't do it. But I think the other point that came up, and it certainly came up at the last board meeting, is if we are committed to high levels of learning for all students, in some districts, it may be that we need to find ways to support better pre-K options and summer programming, because that's what those kids need to reach the kinds of aspirational goals that we have for all kids. So somebody may be focused on gifted and talented, and others are making sure that every child enters school ready to go.
I think that probably needs to be reworded.
Yep.
The word choice in it is gonna connotate a whole different,
You're right.
so.
So maybe take that out, and we need to rework
Just
on
erase
that.
that word choices.
But I think some of those issues come up under the first one.
Yeah.
Okay. Under commitment to equity on the top.
Yeah.
It may be that this was an elaboration of that
Yeah, so
point
it's
as
the
well.
commitment to equity.
Yeah.
The next one is to build and maintain school level, and then we added some modifying words, consistent protocol-based databases dealing with school finance and equity. If we want these things, how are we going to know if we're getting them? And that it can't just be every school designing its own system, because somehow we need to be able to talk to each other if we want to share what we're doing and learn from the people who are getting good results. We need to begin by clarifying all those functions, such as legal design, financial modeling, analytical, clerical, and research functions that need to be done in order to make any transition successful. Identify the costs associated with those, as well as who will do the work. Because to do this well, we're fairly certain that no matter which model or which bill moves through, that there's a series of tasks that need to be completed. Whether they're explicit or not in the legislation, we want to make sure those are accounted for. And then finally, we need to identify those functions that will benefit most from centralization. And some of the examples that the group came up with were special education, transportation, chart of accounts, financial systems, HR, and some issues around pay equity for teachers. And those, as opposed to some of those that are really local and ground level personalized decisions. And those might be, for example, the specifics of an IEP, and some community specific issues around how you implement your curriculum or so forth.
Is it purposely left out in this bullet about opportunities? So really what you've just sort of done a management piece as opposed to identifying the functions that benefit centralization in terms of shared arts,
Oh, no, those should go up there, so maybe education.
programmatic things. I mean,
Yeah.
you really, that list really has more to do with,
No, I think that's,
I think we were getting to that with the HR pay equity piece, in other words.
Is that a separate item that might be up above?
well, I think it's up here, I mean, maybe it's.
Right there.
well, but if you're identifying things that could benefit, and
Yeah.
so you could, you have a drama program, you have the arts programs
Right.
that may not be in all equity places. So I see this as identifying things, and that is the commitment to equity.
But my point was, you've got all those mundane things in the last bullet point, but what we're really concerned about is educational opportunities, and that ought to be up above.
Right. But I think what Shamri's calling out is that there's some educational functions which may be better served in a
Centralized.
in a
Okay.
centralized way.
Okay.
Whereas there's
Yep.
others that really have to be local. And it's probably the scale issue, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. Does that sum it up, Bill? Does that do the job?
I think so. Just a couple of editorials on my part is the clarifying the costs and functions in the amount of work that's going to be required to pull this thing together and meet those very ambitious timelines, I think is really going to be problematic, and I think that's being underestimated. And yeah, this principle of what can be centralized, I think, as I'd said earlier, there are some things that can be centralized and more economically done at a higher level, and who knows, even higher than that for some functions. But then this keeping the thing individualized and personalized for parents and for kids is very important, and we really have to strike that balance. There's some other stuff which is on the,
We forgot, we had this whole conversation about analyzability. Do you want something up there on that?
okay, go for it. Do you want to?
No, we're gonna take the scatter plot off, because that was too, do you want to talk about that? Is it-
Well, why don't you start with this piece? It really gets towards data wonky things. And go ahead and we'll start and I'll chime in.
But I think the question was to move towards a place where we could actually give, if one of our goals is where to go. This one, to have clear goals and clarity about who gets students to those goals, to think about to match our system of how we make sense of whether we're getting to those goals to whatever structure we have around who's accountable for those goals. It has to be something where we can look at it and actually get good information about whether we're actually successfully moving kids from pre-kindergarten through 12.
Oh, that terrible word, authentic data.
Oh, Lord. The thing that the thing that gets to me, and what the scatter plots are showing, is the data gets more unreliable the smaller the n becomes. And there's some things in which we're just not going to collect data on, which gets us back to the educational quality review process and the standards, and how are we going to collect the data on these things, and that becomes a very integral part of the entire thing if we're going to assure equity and equality. And if we end up with larger districts, will we be hiding some things that are smaller and have greater variation in them, in that data? And we can't really lose that, which means we have to look at it differently. We can go to districts on the right-hand plot and get some aggregate data, but that also hides the small data.
Are we getting ahead of ourselves in what we're trying to do here?
Yeah, because
Well, we could be. It's not simple.
well,
I think you're trying to, I liked what Rebecca was saying for us to kind of pull back to our core.
Right.
What were our goals as the board, and then move with that, and I think the balance of the small and the large is something that we were all committed to, so maybe even just by taking the kind of the way we did with the centralization, but the personal balance, the analyzability with the implement educational quality review process, because so recognizing that there are those small schools, those situations where it's going to take a team of talented educators to go into a school to really do the hands, boots on the ground, research and understanding and conversation where you really understand what's going on. And that doesn't mean we're not going to take advantage of the opportunities to get a system that will allow us to look statewide, school to school or district to district. So can we use those as the balances, saying that we're committed to both? Does that make sense? Because I think that's, especially thinking about us as a board, if like we will often go back and forth on those two things. What do we need for a state, and then how do we balance that with the individual needs of a district or a community?
And can I just clarification question? If we set the EQS and we set the policy, and the state goes in and says this quality review process, the school isn't meeting that, so what happens after that? I know it's getting off topic a little bit, but if a school is not meeting that process, what are the steps taken? Or what if the school comes back and says, well, we'd love to do that, but we don't have the money to do that? And so if somebody's not meeting the EQS, what's set down in those standards? What are the repercussions?
that's the agencies.
We would presumably, we already do that. We have a process for
That's
school
in the
review.
law.
Yeah, it's in the law.
Okay.
So we'd follow that, and there would be a set of sanctions that would come back.
And basically, they have to meet their plans, or
But
ultimately,
they could
the
be
state
invited.
has sanctions.
They're inviting the heavy arm of intervention if they don't meet their plans. But they develop those plans, so it would be consistent with their work.
Are you prepared to vote on these things?
We got
Wait,
more,
he's got
we
a
got
couple more. He's
more.
not done. We're very productive.
Oh,
Yeah. The right-hand side in the bluish-greenish stuff, which I may have to call on Carol's help here, that doesn't,
Final
yeah, the final
of design team.
The final approval process, we had the following procedural questions for the legislature. The final approval process, which is something you brought up, Stephen, is this committee, is this 9-member committee going to have this kind of power to do things without any kind of review? We think probably there needs to be a final approval process that's pretty rigorous for this to happen. The tax process needs some more development work and some modeling. We think that it's going to be pretty ragged. The plus 5% and the minus 5% is not going to work out in reality as smoothly as it looks in theory, and that needs to be looked at. Voting proportionality is a biggie. What do you do about big towns, small towns, and proportional voting, one person, one vote, and what are the effects on the small towns of this? This has to be developed. What's the next one there, Mark?
Clarifying waiver of rules.
Oh, yeah. This is vaguely alluded to in the Ways and Means version, probably in the House Ed version, as I recall, is that we could waive rules, but there's the implication in the language that we're going to be waiving more than rules. It says legal obligations or something like that. And I don't think we have the authority to go waiving laws. And so that needs to be clarified. What's the next one? The glares.
Capacities to address work for the design team. Clarity of functions, role.
And my thought on this is welcome design team to a full-time job for which you will get paid $50 a day for the next 4 years. I think that's tremendously underestimated, and I think this was a
We get to have fun.
concern of everybody. It's a huge amount of work, and it's going to be very difficult work, and I think that's been underestimated. The last question or concern to be resolved is what are the private school roles, the independent school roles in all of this, which is not addressed very specifically. I know that some independent schools fear this will be used as a mechanism to get rid of them, while other people see it as an opportunity to expand. Well, what is the role? This just isn't clarified, and it's a huge and contentious policy issue. So that's it, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so what I would propose is that we would take votes, motions and votes on the two areas. The belief statements, is that a good title for that? For what we've, yes? Okay.
I would
All right.
I would tend to take them both as a group, even though they do vary in type and form.
Well, we can, whatever the pleasure of the board is. We can do it as one motion, two motions, we can do them individually if you want. Individually meaning each little bullet point.
Can I ask one question before we do that?
Yes.
It's sort of on this side in terms of procedural questions. I thought as part of our conversation this morning, there was some concern about just the makeup of the design team, and that doesn't seem to be here anywhere. It's not reflected.
Oh, I think that probably needs to be added. You want to add it up there, and there's a blank spot there that it would fit into.
What am I adding? Just the fact that you want the makeup of the design team? The size and makeup.
It
And I
may
think
seem self-serving, but I think if you're gonna question that, and you want the board involved, you ought to encourage them to leave the current language in the Ways and Means Bill, meaning the chair of the State Board of Education.
Well,
Or his liaison, or
Oh,
his,
absolutely, you should definitely always do that.
but, I mean, you.
You want me to write that on there?
Yeah, just so you don't, we're not.
Like,
we're not
don't
throwing-
get rid of the
Yeah,
chair?
well, be a little bit
No, but
diplomatic.
my comments this morning were more specific to the types of
Expertise.
individuals that
Right.
could address some of, all of these lists that are here.
But let me tell you, the Speaker, the President Pro Tem, and the Governor are not gonna want some restrictions on who they appoint.
Maybe not restrictions,
maybe the
but
size.
guidelines?
Well,
Somebody with these expertise?
It's fine, do what you will, I'm not questioning, I see your point.
I think we should add
So am I
Jean
adding-
Marie's point about having the proper expertise available on the committee, and we don't need to say more than the proper expertise, but I think that's an important point. Wasn't there some wanting to depoliticize the thing in the latest version, which is no sitting member and
Yes.
They have
Yes.
that. in
stuff
there.
like that?
Yeah, although they still left the compensation for the sitting members in the
We
draft.
understand.
In our conversation this morning, I feel we also touched on the CTEs. So the idea of what happens to what happens in the career centers.
Because they're silent.
Right. So is that something we want to add? Just question mark what's going
Clarification
on?
of the
So
tech
under
centers.
private Tech centers.
Separate bullet, yeah, role of tech centers and tech center governance. Good catch.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept, or to propose that we adopt the belief statements and the procedural questions identified at this meeting.
Is there a second to Jean Marie's motion? Chris's seconds, is there a discussion?
Do we have to identify where we're sending them to?
I think that would probably be good, is to specify that this be communicated to the legislature.
Yeah.
So, any particular committee, or do we just send it
Well,
to
why
the
don't you,
committee?
why don't you leave that up to, I mean, it's gonna be pretty fluid in the next few weeks, and, you know, what's the best way to implement it?
We'll leave that up to you, Stephen.
Well, thank you for saying that. I was trying to figure out another way, so I didn't have to quite say it.
I say it for you. Leave that up
Okay.
to Stephen. To the chair of the board.
But that doesn't need to be in the motion. And obviously, you know, this is open access to all board members as well. Any further discussion? If not, we have a motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Don't hear any noes. This motion is passed unanimously. And so Carol, or Jill, I don't know who's going to do it, but as soon as you can get this retyped in a nice form, would you make sure we all have copies, please? Okay. Secretary's report.
Okay. First of all, I was going to just tell you, I will be sending you a link. One of the things that we're working on at the agency is figuring out how we can use our current communication channels to communicate more effectively with the field about the work that we're doing. And we've developed a sort of a blog page for the Common Core that's sort of a prototype, where we've invited people from the field as well as people in-house to talk about their work around it and where they see it going and how they see it leading to improved learning for students in the state of Vermont. And what I'll do is share it out to you, and I'd love to get your feedback and input. So I'll send that out to you after today. Next, I wanted to also just acknowledge and call out Jay Ramsey, who was appointed president of the National Alliance for Partnerships in Equity. He'll be here in a little bit to talk about his work with career and technical education in the state of Vermont. But he's currently the lead for the Alliance's STEM Equity Project, and it's great to see someone from Vermont playing that role in the national level. And he's also, incidentally, the first male head of this organization, so that's sort of an interesting little catch, too. In terms, I want to give you an update on our work to move forward with the balanced accountability model. We are continuing to both develop this work in-house and working with various partners. We spoke to some of that last month. This month, I'm going to share with you that we've worked with the VPA to schedule a series of breakfast conversations for school principals and assistant principals. We now have 7 sites across the state. That's 2 up from this morning. The demand has been high from the field, so we're scheduling more as people contact us. We currently have events scheduled in Rutland, Heartland, Brattleboro, St. Albans, Colchester, and Lyndonville. And we are inviting people from the regions in which we're going to learn, first of all, about the resolution that you've passed, encouraging us to develop the new accountability model, to look at the educational quality review pieces that we are putting in place, and to invite their input into that before we dig deep into the details of implementation. And so the purpose behind this is to take what we've gotten so far with your input and begin to get input from stakeholders in the field, so that whatever product we arrive at both has sort of broad support, but is also really shaped by practitioners who are closest to the work and who will be most directly affected by it. So that's an exciting piece. I also wanted to just call out a report that was put together by Manuela Fonseca and some other people at the agency to support H270, the pre-K bill. And what we did is we analyzed our own Vermont data and found what we expected to find, which is that when children who are living in poverty have the opportunity to attend preschool, it benefits them. We also found some other interesting results, and I wanted to share those with you because it really showcases the kind of work we're trying to do to analyze our own Vermont data, so that the policies that we're developing are supported not just by national data, but by our own work. And what we found is that poor students who don't attend pre-K have a 30% probability of being kindergarten ready when they get to kindergarten, while children who live in poverty with 1 year or 2 years of pre-K have a 35% or a 55% probability of arriving at kindergarten ready to learn. So that's exciting, because that shows that participating in pre-K does improve and leave those students better able to succeed when they get to school. And we really think that's tremendously important. We also found that relationship present for more affluent students, though not as pronounced. So more affluent students who don't attend pre-kindergarten or only go for 1 year have a 58% probability of being kindergarten ready, while students who go for 2 years have a 70% probability of being ready. So the takeaway for us is that pre-K matters, and actually more pre-K matters more. And the real effects, particularly for our low-income children or children from those, it's 2 years, it's not 1 year. And that's, I just wanted to show you that because it's really important and it's really powerful to see that in our own data. And we also feel we're working on, as part of the Race to the Top grant, we're working on getting better measures and working with better measures, and we're expecting that as those measures become better tuned and even more precise, we may get even more nuanced understandings of what's going on in our preschools. But that's an exciting piece.
Dr., what was your, when you talked about the 1 to 2 year, are you basing it on the 10 hours that are paid for, or was this beyond that? Was this just the 10 hours that?
My understanding is it's the people who are in the 10 hours of preschool. There is always some noise around what exactly is meant. I'm sure some of them are a little bit more than 10. So our gross, not as in disgusting, but gross as an overall cut, was kids who had indicated they were participating in preschool. There's probably some noise around duration and frequency, we don't know. But still, even with all that noise,
No, I know,
we're getting these
I
effects.
find that the 10 hours is so minimal that I wonder if most of the children who are in these 10-hour programs or being paid for the 10-hour programs are actually in them longer. In other words, most of the programs, at least what I'm familiar with, they're paid for 10 hours, but the students are actually there longer, which gives them the ability to actually go. So
I think that's probably true, and if you talk to the people who are working on this data, they would say that those are some of the issues we're hoping to be able to tease out when we have better measures. We don't yet have the data that we would need, is my understanding, to make
10
some of
hours
those
is
findings.
really
It's not
so
much.
minimal.
It is not much. On the other hand, what we are seeing
Better
is
than
10 hours
nothing.
for 2 years, it is making a difference. I mean, it's not getting everybody to the start line by the time they start school, but it is getting a substantially larger proportion of kids ready, which is huge, because if you reach kindergarten not ready for school, you're behind as you
Well,
move
and
to
that's a
forward.
pretty big percentage increase from 30 to 50.
It is huge. And what it suggests to us, and what we're trying to encourage the field to do, is to look at that. And if you're really worried about improving learning overall for your K-12 system, you really need to begin by thinking about pre-K. And if you don't have a pre-K, you need to be pushing one in, is our sense. So, and again, there's quality issues, and one of the things that we hope to be able to do with the Race to the Top grant is both have better guidelines for both measuring quality of programs and providing technical support and feedback to the field about how to make sure that if only 10 hours is what they're offering, at least it's a really high quality 10 hours, but also support for districts. And we're seeing many districts are starting to put in place the 10 hours and then provide supplemental childcare, often in partnership with a private provider over and beyond that. So those are still issues that the field is developing.
I think one of the other things, Stephen, do you mind?
Not at all.
That came up in the early days of this bill was the idea of taking business away from private early ed preschools. And my experience, at least from the area that I am, is that it took a while, but that because of the partnerships, that didn't come to fruition, and I think that was one of those fear factors that may want to be looked at as it expands, that it's not taking, the partnerships allow for the business to continue, whatever the preschool business is.
Well, and Act 270 is really, it's going to give parents choice. If parents choose to stay in a private provider, they'll receive public funding to support that. So it shouldn't have that effect on private providers. I think the larger issue is, are we increasing the access of children to high-quality preschool, and in particular, are we increasing access for the kids who need it and seem to benefit the most? And those would be kids living in low-income families. And there's a lot of work we have to do, I think, also about reaching parents and supporting parents as sort of first teachers. So I'm hopeful as we move forward and we begin to build these partnerships, we'll do a better job with that as well.
I was just wondering with being ready for kindergarten being something, not what I experienced when I went to kindergarten. Being ready for kindergarten meant, that I was dressed and I was there and could play in the sandbox or whatever. I certainly think in terms of equity, I understand what is important. I get nervous when I hear get ready for kindergarten and what that means, but what we're asking 2 and 3-year-olds to do, about what's expected. So I'm just assuming that when we're talking about high quality, it's kind of the things that are enumerated in stars, that high quality doesn't
is.
mean just
Right.
drilling kids on alphabet. It means
No.
Play.
play and, right, so I'm assuming that's what we need, but I just want to clarify that's
And
what
that is
we're
exactly the
talking
intent. But I think it is true that through structured and deliberate play, you build sort of pre-literacy. I mean, as
Absolutely.
simple as, do you understand that a book
It's a
is
book.
pleasurable and can give you, you can learn things from it, and it's a book,
a
that
book.
it has a beginning and an end. I mean, those are sort of pre-literacy concepts, which I think we take for granted if you come from a family where people are reading to you every day. But if we've worked in a kindergarten, particularly in a district that serves low income, or kids from low income backgrounds or really disadvantaged backgrounds, they may not have seen a book before.
Right.
And so the notion that you would want to learn to read is something you have to begin with even before you get to those literacy skills. And the same goes for numeracy.
Right.
Having a concept of number, or beginning to understand that numbers are a way that we organize the universe, is something that some kids just don't understand.
Right, or even I'm thinking like communication. I mean, watching ELL students play in the block area, their development of language is incredibly rapid. When they want to say, "That is my block and don't take it," you are learning customs and norms and facial expression in a way that when you're pulling kids out for special language, it's not quite the same. Anyway, I just wanted to make sure that we are all, when
It's
we're
the
talking about
stars.
high
It's
quality.
the stars work you spoke. It really is about that. And one of the things, again, that we're hoping. Oh, good, we're going to get this. One of the things that we're hoping for with the with some of the technical assistance that we hope to provide is opportunities for people both to see other programs and get a sense of it. You didn't have to do that. Thank you so much. So we're having our own technical issues, and Morgan is seamlessly compensated for my idiocy. so
He's done very well by the board today,
he,
too.
I noticed that.
He's very stealth, you know.
I noticed I just want to make sure that the only problem he was dealing with was access to the internet, and you weren't actually getting computer services. But installation of software while you were here.
We'll talk about that later.
As I was saying, so this is an example I just wanted to share with you because we're actually pretty excited about it. So this is one of the issues that's come up a lot in the state of Vermont recently is the Common Core. What is it? Why are we doing it? And what does it look like for teachers in the field? So this is a page that's linked to some of our curriculum work, and it talks about, first of all, on the left, what is the Common Core? And then it introduces various people. So, for example, Pat Fitzsimmons is someone who works in the agency and has done a tremendous amount of work working with the Professional Learning Network to put together really high-quality professional development opportunities for teachers so that they can begin to grapple with the standards and what they are, but also what the implications are for trying to figure out how to deliver them in a classroom. So if you click on this little link, first of all, you get to see Pat and see who she is, and there's a nice little blog that she's written that talks about her role at the agency, but also how that relates to the Common Core. And then you can pick on, these are other people. So here's a social studies teacher up here because people think of English, language arts, and math with respect to the Common Core. What's great about this is what we are starting to see is how the Common Core standards for social studies are also changing the way we're thinking across the curriculum. And incidentally, he's a former Vermont Teacher of the Year, and it's nice to profile some of our practitioners. And if you're really feeling like inflicting punishment on yourself, you can scroll all the way down and see my little diatribe, and I'll let you see it because, of course, as Angela's laughing in the back, it's because I have a lot to say. So I'll let you peruse that at your
But
leisure.
I see, does Angela have a hand in this?
Angela is the genius behind the throne with her team,
I could,
and Lachlan is going to be up here very soon. He just hasn't gotten his in on time because he's been busy with the
No,
plant.
mine's in. Mine is in.
But we have Travis Van Alsten and I'm going to pronounce it wrong. And Alex have also been putting this together. But what they've done is Angela's really thought through, what it takes
I
to
can
put one of
see.
these together, given some guidelines, and is now working with a variety of other teams. And we know we're having lots of questions from the field about you name it, smarter balance assessment, English language learning, school climate, what are the issues, what's going on in Vermont around some of these issues. And we're really excited and proud by her efforts to both put voices of practitioners up and show models of work that's going well and show people really thinking deeply about some of the work. Because I think we're sort of, we're the agency and people sometimes don't know the people behind the web pages. This puts them up, but it also connects us to the ongoing work in the field. So hopefully, we're have one for preschool. I think the problem now is getting Angela out of her cubicle so she isn't besieged by requests to transform everything right away. So we're pretty excited about this. So that's our public face. and I'll let you look at that. This is the link I was going to send you. And then the last thing I was just going to introduce and throw out to you is that when we sort of got into this a little bit this morning, but we are aware that 883 is moving through the legislature, and it's the bill that doesn't die. I mean, it's coming back, it's a different iteration, but it's pretty clear that in our contact with the field, for better or for worse, there's been a sea change, and we're starting to hear that something needs to happen from the majority of people with whom we interact. What that something is not clear yet, but we are beginning to analyze what the implications of this work are for the agency, but we are also going to encourage you to think through what the implications of this work are for you as the State Board of Education. So I think we started to actually do that with some of the belief statements, and if you think about some of the pieces here, this puts a burden. If you think about the House Ways and Means version of the bill, which has very clear expectations for when a new accountability model is in place, that's actually pushing up the timeline for some of the education quality review work that we'd proposed in response to the EQS, because we're certainly not going to develop two systems. So I just wanted to put that out and encourage us at a future board meeting to take some time to really think through the implications of what key components of the bill are that seem to have enduring value. Because some of them we're going to do anyway, regardless of what happens, and certainly the accountability work we will do. But we want to be thinking about it with an eye to what's coming through the legislature. And we also want to think about some of the burdens. If there are opportunities to get public input, for example, we will need clerical support. A question you might have, you had a number of questions, particularly on the right, there are things that you want to know the answers to. We don't have a lot of support for research, for example, or for modeling. And these might be things you need to think about, whether to inform your deliberative processes, you feel you have a need for some additional kind of support as we head into any kind of big change that you want to think about and articulate. Just so you know, we are beginning to do some work that would support some of the voluntary red process if it happened. Anyway, because as Vaughn said, we are receiving a lot of queries from districts who, regardless of what happens, they view this as an opportunity to begin thinking about that. And we will be reaching out to our good friends at 2 Prospect, Ken's in here in the back, and also Jeff Francis and Steve Dale, and also to Laura Suarez, to think about whether we could collaborate, put our efforts together to try to put together really a handbook or a guidebook on how you do this, and as Mark mentioned, to possibly also put in some of the roadblocks or obstacles that seem to trip people up in this process. So we want to support that, and we're trying to think through what resources we need, but we would strongly encourage the board to dedicate some time to sit down with the proposals and to think through what the implications are for your work. And to support that, we would be prepared to bring back to a future meeting a summary of what we see as some of the functions that would be necessary to do this work successfully, so that you could begin to think about where you would fit into that.
Maybe if I could butt in for just a second. I know at the board retreat in June, we're primarily going to spend the bulk of our time on the strategic plan, the next strategic plan. But this also, at that point, we would know, A, if there is legislation that's passed, and B, what form it is. Mm-hmm. So that maybe we ought to gear ourselves to spend some time at the board retreat looking at that. You reminded me of something when you were talking about under H83, assuming it had passed, that you would have some staffing concerns, et cetera. And I just went back and looked. In the House Ed bill, there was $4 million in the bill. The Ways and Means bill, there's not a cent that I can find anyway.
And that's a concern for us, and it certainly came up with Sean Marie's point. In the House Ed, for example, it had a whole legal committee that was going to tease through some of the legal issues around this, everything from contracts to, to whatever.
And some of that $4 million was staffing for you and staffing for us, as well as other things.
And if you take those pieces out, it doesn't mean the work doesn't need to get done. It just means it's less clear who's going to do the work. And so
you just don't know who's going to do it.
Right. And so our point is, we shouldn't assume because it's not in the bill that it won't have to get done. So what you need to begin doing, for example, if you know you have to close districts and then reopen new districts, that's time. That takes a tremendous amount of clerical support. If we're going to do a lot more of them than you're currently doing, that would place a new set of burdens on whoever was providing support to you. So that's the kind of thing you need to think through, just to make sure this moves efficiently.
it just strikes me that I wouldn't know how to do that right now, not knowing what shape things are gonna take.
Right, which is why you wait till June.
Well, or maybe May, but
Yeah.
I think we need more information than we have right now.
We'll bring you
Yeah, I think
functions.
that we're gonna know the tail inside of a month. Maybe by this time next month, we'll be clear about.
Might even be adjourned.
It could happen.
I remember a period in time when we used to adjourn in April. I didn't mean to use that word.
Those days are long ago.
That was a long time ago.
Well, was the world that much more complicated, or was it just better leadership?
I'm sure it was
Definitely better leadership. Not a
The
question.
new technology.
Let's move on. Any questions of Rebecca? Yes, Chris.
Could you just talk about with the EQS, it set up graduation requirements moving to proficiency-based for the students entering 7th grade this fall, so for their graduation, and what movement has been made there? There's been a lot of concern, I know even at my school, trying to figure out, because there are so many standards right now, so are we looking at the frameworks, we're looking at the Common Core, we're looking at Next Gen, and trying to put this all together, and just wondering what's happening at the agency, and what should local schools be doing, and what timeline does the agency have?
Well, there's several pieces, and a lot of that is in development. We've embarked on a partnership through the greater schools with, and we've also been able to receive some foundation support for it. So it's really a 5-state collaboration to begin to develop and pilot proficiency-based assessments. And we're targeting some areas that we think are high leverage, high priority areas, including the transferable skills and some of the areas that maybe are not represented by the Common Core assessments, the Smarter Balance assessments. And those will be piloted in the League of Innovative Schools, and we're trying to contract with someone right now who can help us develop a process for scoring and calibrating that we think will yield some higher reliabilities than we're seeing, for example, with the Vermont Portfolio Initiative. So we're trying to take advantage of some of the developments and performance assessments to do that.
Pilot?
It's actually ongoing right now. They're already doing the work. In terms of rolling it out, we hope to have sample common tasks and sample sort of work samples that can be used for scoring. Tom, you can probably speak to the specifics as well. But I think what we probably ought to do is come back to the meeting and give you a timeline for some of that work. We have been also engaged in negotiations with Smarter Balance. They've talked about proficiency-based approaches. We're still pushing them, and we're not clear that through them we're going to get what we need to address all of that.
So I'm just thinking, so for schools
Those
looking
years
ahead,
perfect.
at what time, because to make proficiency-based requirements, and then everybody wants to pilot it before you have the class that's going to graduate with those proficiency requirements. And
I would argue that you'll have the same problem with proficiency-based assessments that you'll have with the Common Core assessments, and that is that it's not, you want to set high standards because you want to set aspirational goals for kids, but there needs to be some flexibility in the transition. So I would assume that we're in transition for 5 to 7 years, because it's not fair to test a person on your grade level 8 expectations if they haven't had opportunities to practice beforehand. So I would assume that we will be piloting and experimenting, but there will have to be some flexibility around what we mandate until we have some reasonable assurance that they're high quality and we have some reliability and validity, so that any inferences we're making based on those tools are really legitimate. We don't want to penalize a kid if our technology isn't yet where it needs to be.
And so when will that be communicated to schools? Because I think they're already thinking of, well, I need to do graduation requirements hard and fast, because it says in the EQS it needs to be done for these incoming 7th graders, and so.
Soon.
Okay.
We're working on it.
Okay.
Yeah, and maybe that's something else we can put on the agenda for the next meeting to address that.
I'd like to follow up on that question of when and what will be coming out. I feel like we need to get a clear direction out to the field on EQS as to what they can expect and when they can expect it. Because I hear there's somebody running around the state offering a prize if somebody can master this 11th grade math standard.
Oh, that was me, but that was different. That was a different test. That was an EQS.
But we're talking standards and Common Core up here, but where are we? And SBAC is talking about these testing grade levels, but we're talking about possibly going to a 3-year cycle and so forth. And I'm just trying to figure out how the pieces are fitting together and when we might have some kind of timeline I need to get a better grasp on that, I guess.
We do too, and part of it is there's a lot in flux. We don't know. We're meeting. I'm going actually out to Minneapolis with a team from the AOE at the end of the month. We will expect to get some better answers from Smarter Balance there. We're spending 3 days. We'll be engaging in conversations about these specific topics and what we'll be able to do and not do with the tests. Given that they're grade level tests by design, it's still not clear to us what we'll be able to know about the proficiency of students who are far below or far above grade level, for example. So we don't know whether these tests will be able to meet some of those purposes. I know John was at a conference last week where he began to have some of these conferences about how we could use some of the Smarter Balance items for those purposes. There's a lot of moving parts, and until we have the next set of meetings, I'm not sure we'll have enough specifics from them to be able to make our own plans, because we just don't know what the technical capabilities of those tools are. Moving forward, we do know that we are committed to developing the proficiency-based assessments. We are committed to developing common assessments and some common scoring guides with work samples for those that we can use to share, and we know we will have to do some training across the state. We are looking forward to the educational quality reviews as an opportunity for scoring across school sites, which we think will ensure consistency of standards and reduce sort of drift across sites of what it means to achieve proficiency on a certain set of standards. At this point, we are also committed to taking the time to think it through so that we do it better rather than to try to rush it out the gate. I think there's a tremendous amount of work around implementation of education quality standards. It's a huge job, and we're just at the beginning. And I think it's more important to do work that has integrity than to rush to put in place pieces that look like we've addressed those concerns but really won't do the job. And there's a lot of educators here, and I think you know what I mean by that.
I would totally support that, just because it's too crazy otherwise. And I think if we're going to move to a place where the department or the agency has a reputation that people want to support and follow, I think your thinking in terms of being really thoughtful in terms of implementation makes a lot of sense, because there's a lot going on anyway and in every school. So the idea of not rushing it feels really appropriate right now.
Jill?
If I may just add real quickly, there's whole groups of agency folks working on, basically broken up by section on the EQS, the Comprehensive Local Assessment System, the graduation requirements piece. There's a group of us who are trying to, at least in time for this fall's cycle, to take our unified framework of standards, Common Core, the Vermont framework, all those, and give schools a sample graduation requirements based on those standards. It wouldn't be required, but it's something to start from. I'm sure it would evolve, and we're looking at other states and what they've had, so that we can at least start to get those things out of school, knowing that they'll continue to evolve and change. So there's a lot of movement and a lot of groups of folks in the agency working on it. It's really framework. The EQS acts as the framework for all of those different projects.
We like it because actually what it's doing is...
I just want, because I know that this is happening at other schools where they're pulling in and doing the work already because they think they have to. So I'm not sure if it's being communicated to schools actually that EQS says 2017, hold on, the state agencies, we're putting this together. So they're starting to do that work, and I guess my fear is we start having proficiencies all different all over the state, and then kids, especially high-risk students, move around quite a bit. And what happens when they move into one district and they have one set of proficiencies and they move to another? I already had a whole teacher training day talking about what's graduation requirements. We had to talk about grit for a half an hour, and should we make that a graduation requirement? So I think if we don't talk
encourage
about
that,
it,
because there's no research evidence yet that you can actually build grit.
And
And
thereby
that's
also defeating the purpose of Common Core and having
Right.
like a
If you-
common.
if you-
But I think that's the problem without, if the
think-
field doesn't know about it, then they start doing things like this. And we had to go in at 7:30 in the morning and talk about what do we want from graduation, Tony Wagner's survival skills, and how are we going to put that in. And this is just what's happening. I feel like it is a waste of time. And I think that is happening because the message is they're thinking we have to get this ready for these students. So I guess just communicating that out, that these graduation requirements wait, don't focus on it yet. When there's so many other things to do, especially Common Core, to then have to go in. I can't even tell you how frustrated the teachers were after getting up early in the morning, coming in and doing this and be like, oh, wait, now we have to teach creativity? And this is the direction we're going? So I think there is some confusion about the proficiency-based graduation requirements.
So I think the takeaway for me is that we need to do a communication sooner rather than later to the field
Big thing
that
these
addresses
days,
this.
along
Yeah.
with grit.
We can do
Okay.
it.
Yes, I would agree with that, too.
Other questions or comments on Rebecca's
Thank you,
report?
that's helpful.
If not, we will move on to item H. Approval of a post-secondary
Good. No, it's
program.
good. It's very helpful.
I saw John was here. Did he,
He ran away.
he ran away? Yeah,
Kathy can handle it.
okay.
You skipped one.
This was an item that was on the consent agenda, I believe, in March. We tabled it, and it's on the action agenda today.
Yes. I'm Kathy Hogendorf. I know most of you. One of my roles at the agency is to deal with the regulatory compliance requirements that fall under the purview of the agency in regards to post-secondary educational programs doing business in Vermont. What we have recommended with this item is approval for a new school that we have reviewed per our protocols that are outlined in our rules and in our processes that have been in place for quite some time. And we have recommended approval. And I'm happy to offer you any additional information, as is the founder and CEO of Aplerno, who is also here. If you have any questions about our process, we're glad to review those with you. Our normal process for these approvals is the consent agenda recommendation, which is what we had in front of you at last month's meeting. And I'm here to offer whatever additional assistance I can so that you can make your vote.
Why don't we do it this way, because I know some board members do have questions, so why don't we allow questions of you from the agency's point of view, then if you say the CEO is here, I'm sure we'd be glad to hear from him. You're welcome to come up, but I want to keep the discussion right now
Okay.
for the agency. Maybe start off, this is a little bit unique. We understand, that the approval process of independent schools and how that has to be done. I don't know that that we've seen an application like this before. Maybe you have, but I don't know that the board has. Just briefly, what's your process in looking at a school like this and how it differs with an actual physical school?
Okay. Well, Aplerno, with your blessing, will be the first wholly online post-secondary institution based in Vermont. And so from that respect, it is unique. However, that's one of the few areas in which it's unique, because our approval or review standards and process doesn't differ much between the delivery model. And we're looking at financial integrity, we're looking at the protection of consumers and what kind of information is made available and the integrity of programs offered, very standard stuff. In our post-secondary function in the agency for approving schools, we have basically two levels of approval that we offer, recommendation for your approval that we offer. One is to offer credit-bearing, to offer courses for credit. And that is what our recommendation for this approval is. The other is for approval for degree granting authorization. Aplerno is not requesting degree granting authorization at this time. And yes, I have seen other applications like this before. I would give, it's not an even flow of applications that we get for this, but I would say we get 3 or 4 serious approaches annually from individuals or groups that want to start a new college. And the only ones that make it to your consent agenda have gone through what we consider a fairly thorough and rigorous review. And so, they're the only ones that make it here, are ones that we're confident to stand behind. The majority of work that I do is reviewing existing, established post-secondary schools in other states that want to do business here and have a physical presence here. We have, different ways of looking at the different criteria from different schools, and it's always very interesting. This being the first wholly online school that would be based in Vermont, there was a little bit of invention of the review process. We did put together a team of 3, myself, John Fisher, the deputy secretary, still adjusting. And we brought in one expert from the outside as per the state board rules, and that was Dr. Bill Clements. I don't know if you know Bill, but he is a vice president and dean of the College of Graduate and Continuing Studies at Norwich University. I've worked with Bill on a couple of other post-secondary policy issues on a national level, and called upon him, and he was very eager to lend his expertise to help with his recommendation, and gave us a wholehearted endorsement that that the agency recommend approval of a Plano to you. So that's basically our process.
No one ever calls you.
Fine, any questions?
Kathy,
Yes.
I'm just wondering if you could tell us where it falls in the rules. I know we have the independent school process rules. Can you just
Yep. There's
tell
a
me the
set of
number?
rules that is the 2240 section. The specific rule that talks about our review process is Rule 2243. I printed off a copy of the rules. It's 2240 post-secondary schools. They haven't been updated in quite some time, and they haven't been updated
like in 20 years?
to deal, yeah. Almost, not quite.
Okay.
They haven't been updated to address online delivery. And that's okay with me, because frankly, I don't think they fall short, because online delivery should meet the same standards as brick and mortar delivery. And it's, the things that we look at really don't differ. Yes, we don't go and inspect their physical library, but, there isn't that much that is different. And on the post-secondary level, I guess, actually on the secondary level too, but on the post-secondary level, online programs and online delivery is a fast-growing and fast-morphing segment of post-secondary education. And so trying to update the rules to keep up with that wouldn't work anyway. So it's okay with me that they're basic enough that we can work within and not, address that specifically. We do, by the way, have in the miscellaneous education bill, which is, right now in Senate Ed, we do have a little bit of language in there related to our post-secondary approval that relates to online programs and an interstate reciprocity movement that's happening, and just making sure that there's nothing in Vermont law that will prevent us from going with that movement, which will, I strongly believe, be a big benefit to both institutions and states as they try to regulate the internet, as it will.
Other questions of Kathy? Yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, would it be helpful to the board if you talked about this? Are you familiar with Vermont virtual learning? Okay, sorry. Yeah, okay.
Not as it
Because I
relates
think
to
what-
post-secondary.
Well, and I'm just thinking about, I think
Yeah.
the challenge for some board members is understanding how delivery happens. Maybe you could talk about that a bit, or is that something, because that's some of the questions I've gotten outside, address that.
Well, frankly, this would be a good time for me to introduce Rob Skiff. Because Rob Skiff, sitting next to me, is the CEO and founder of Aplerno, and he's well-versed in the methods that are used for this type of delivery. And in fact, Oplerno will be delivered on a platform that Rob is much more familiar with than I. And in fact, we've brought hard copies of screenshots. He can grab that computer and run you through his site, whatever you would like in that regard.
Before that happens, could you just talk about, you said you had to use some invention in this review process. Could you
Only-
elaborate on that
Yes.
and what that means and what liberties were taken during the review
Very
process?
little, and maybe that was a poor choice of words, but very little. In our review process, we have a B, C, D that we will look at. And when it came to looking at physical facilities, I mean, obviously, there was a little bit of interpretation, if you would, but there was no reduction in the review by any means. And when I say we, I'm talking about John Fisher and Dr. Bill Clements and myself. When we reviewed Oplerno, we had to think about, we had continuously put ourselves in the position of a higher ed student that was sitting in their own home. And how would that student be served and their rights be protected, and how would they have full access to the kinds of student supports and things. So it was more, maybe invention wasn't the right word, interpretation on how to look at the school. And we came away from that review feeling very confident, keeping in mind that this is a startup. It hasn't started up yet because it needs your approval to do so. And therefore, we can't look at how are the students being served, because they're not yet. And that's the joy and the excitement of a startup, is that you need to let it start up. And as part of their approval, I mean, we will continue, of course, to look at their work. And frankly, I look forward to that.
All right, so why don't we turn it over to, I'm sorry, John?
Rob.
Rob, that was
Rob
close,
Skip.
wasn't it?
No, you're fine. Whatever you would like to call me.
Why don't you tell us about your company and what you hope for here?
Okay, let me deal with the question of the kinds of programs we use to create a learning environment, a classroom. So we're using a platform called Canvas. And it's by Instructure, and it's what local colleges and universities, Champlain uses, Champlain College. It has everything that a regular classroom has except for their physical presence. So there's text-based articles and readings that you put up. There's video and audio-based interaction via discussion. And there's all kinds of, you're placing the syllabus in front of the students, the activities, meetings that can go on, what you're talking about, synchronously or asynchronously, meaning things that occur with people at the same time. But also, since Oplerno is attracting, we hope, students globally, they're going to be people working and taking classes from all over the world, and they're not going to necessarily be hooking up exactly on time. I reviewed a lot of different content management systems, including Blackboard, Moodles, different free open software. The Canvas is the best, and that's why we picked it. I'm a teacher, okay? I've taught at a secondary school. I was a co-founder of Vermont Common School. Teaching and students are the most important thing for me, and creating that environment where people can learn and where people can create access. So I've designed everything with Oplerno so that it maximizes access and also minimizes cost, okay? Cost for the students. Our classes are small, okay? We will have classes of less than 20 students. This is not a MOOC where we have, tens of thousands of people taking a class. Humans learn best from other humans as they interact. We don't learn, I think, best in huge groups. So I wanted to design a system where you had small classes. The other piece was I wanted to design an educational system where faculty were respected and paid a whole lot more money than adjunct faculty are paid now. So our business model is centered around faculty own all the IP that they develop, which in this case is a class, and they decide what the tuition level is, okay? And then what we do is we split. The faculty member gets 90% of the tuition dollars they generate, and a Palerno takes 10% or $100 per student, whichever is greater. You know, we want to make it so that adjunct faculty, instead of earning sometimes, you know, $2,000 to $5,000 per class, that their rate of pay increases. Because if that's the case, then I think we're going to get a lot better quality teaching that happens online. There's also this. We're really into transparency, so students, before they receive a grade and access to what we call our skills portfolio, they're going to be reviewing the faculty members' teaching and work. And that rating and that review is not anonymous, okay? And it follows the faculty member, okay? Because we think that if we can reward good teaching, and, you know, we want our students, the students of a Palerno, to go online and check out the faculty's credentials. Right now, most of our faculty have doctorates, okay? We have 80 faculty who've signed our contract. And right now we have 5 courses that are ready to go and 35 that are under development. We really want students to look at faculty and find the faculty member that best matches their learning style and take a course with them. That's really, really important to us. For accessibility, you can access Canvas and a Palerno on a smartphone, okay, or on a tablet. It would be better if you were interacting with people you know, on, let's say, a laptop or a notebook. But we wanted to really lower the cost of, again, the accessibility, especially overseas and in places that are not well served with, where cost is a big issue. So Palerno is not going to be spending time recruiting students in Vermont. Okay? We are offered to students and potential faculty members to participate, but we think our role in Vermont is going to be potentially as a pipeline to the state colleges and to the universities. We also think it's going to be a great way to get people back involved in education and in potentially finishing their degree, because the courses are going to be cheaper. We are also very big into I'm not a big fan of student loan debt. I think it's debilitating for people now. It costs too much to go to school, and that debt prevents people from buying homes, starting families, creating businesses. And so we're really committed to keeping our costs low, $500 to $1,500. Again, that's what we think the range is going to be. Faculty decide. And you know, we'd really appreciate, you know, the opportunity to take this forward. All of our, you know, if you look online right now, we haven't, although I think in the rules it says we can recruit, we could have offered classes.
Yes, you could have made the decision to offer classes pending approval, but they've chosen not to.
I'm not for, I wanted to get approval before we started the admissions process because I don't feel it's ethical for me to have people paying for classes and potentially them not being able to transfer them to another institution. So that was our choice. And
What, Kathy, what does that mean? And this is new to me, that if you were successful today and the state board approved this application, does it get on your website certified by the state of Vermont or the State Board of Education? Where does...
You would be granting a certificate of approval to offer credit-bearing courses.
that's it.
And you would obviously
And that
use that in your...
so they would then be able to offer credits for courses taken and would be approved to do so.
But not
But
give.
only,
It's
But
already
not-
on the website. Like it says like pending.
pen-
Like, they're
but,
saying,
but
yeah.
pending, but only if the receiving school, the receiving college or university chooses to accept them. And that's written all in our FAQ, in our student contract, in our, all over our materials. I don't want to, I'm not interested in, you know, misleading anybody into thinking that we're something we're not. And
Any
we're very-
credits are
yeah.
always only as good as whoever's accepting them. You know, they're always subject to the accepting institution, and that's under federal regulations, it's in our laws, it's in our rules, it's standard.
Questions of either Rob or Kathy?
But you're not a degree granting
No.
online?
No.
No.
Okay.
At this
Sorry?
time, they are not requesting degree granting authority. In my experience, a startup or a new school starts and kind of gets its feet under it, and it takes a while to determine when they will have that strength to be able to meet our threshold for granting approval to grant degrees is different, and a different process of review, a much more demanding, I guess, if you want to put it that way, process, because we're looking at a lot of more closely into the longevity of the school, how close it is to attaining some kind of a nationally recognized accreditation, many different things. This is distinctly, we're requesting permission to grant credit to offer credit-bearing courses only.
And not certificates?
No. We want to make sure that the classes are really high quality, that they're meeting the needs of students, that they're affordable. That has to be the first job that we take care of. And then, as faculty approach us with the idea of creating a certificate or a degree program, then we'll start the process of talking with the agency about that. But, you know, we'd also, and going for national approval. We're not going to skip. I mean, the ultimate goal for us is regional accreditation. Okay, with the New England Association, we're also talking over with accrediting bodies in Europe, South America, and also a province in China. I believe firmly in accreditation. It's very, very important. But this is the first step.
It
you
is.
You have to get approval first.
Lachlan?
I was just going to ask, on the website, you encourage interested individuals to suggest ideas for degree programs in the future. So I was curious when you see, I mean, obviously, you know, it's pending accreditation, but when you see a Plurno, how long, you know, do you think that would take to?
It's really tough. I've gotten some proposals for by a rocket scientist, literally a rocket scientist in Colorado, to produce a master's degree in orbital mechanics, which is an engineering degree. Well, that not only has to, an engineering degree not only has to get approval by the state board, but there's national accrediting agencies that we would have to deal with. We're not ready for that. So it depends. You know, I am receiving interest, but I'm not going to, you know, first things first, we need to be able to offer our courses. I see this as down the road a bit. It's certainly not something you're going to be dealing with in the next 6 months.
But 3, 4, 5 years, within the 5-year window?
Sure. Yeah.
Krista?
So I guess I was the one that asked this to be taken off the consent last time, and my concern was we've passed flexible pathways, so students, high school students now are entitled to 2 college classes, and it just seemed an opportune time for this to show up. And then I went to the website, and the website was non-functional. I couldn't get onto it.
We took the website down when we were being reviewed by the board, because to be honest, we created a new website and a whole bunch of things. We were waiting for that pending piece. So the website's up, and obviously you can, you know, and you guys all received an email, I think,
Yep.
to take a look at it.
And I guess,
Yeah.
so I did, and I guess some of my same concerns are, you know, this idea of who are the faculty, because it just asks for people, if you want to be faculty, send us an inquiry, and just, you know, the qualifications. I was a little concerned about the money piece, and this is, I'm especially thinking about in Vermont, that there is no set price. So it is whatever the professor wants it to be, and I'm just thinking of our Vermont students, and and what are they going to be paying for these classes, and there were no syllabuses up, so I couldn't look at a class and see what a syllabus was and seeing what was expected of students, and really could a student with Fidelity go through this course and get credit. There are no course syllabuses up on the
Well,
website.
let me go through each one of those concerns. First off, you can only teach at a Palermo if you have a master's degree or above, and you can only teach at the level that you've received your degree, okay? All of the faculty who've signed up and are developing classes have been through, have graduated from a accredited university in the U.S., okay, with some people overseas. Now, what happens in the process is people are given access to Canvas, they produce their class, we review their class, and it has to follow what are called sort of the Carnegie standards, okay, which is every class has to be 12 weeks long, it has to have at least three contact hours, okay, with extra homework, okay, and extra work that occurs outside the class, just like the college classes that, you and I probably took when we were undergraduates or graduate students. People don't get to offer classes unless they're vetted, unless they've gone through our internal check process, okay?
Could you describe that?
Can I'm sorry.
Give your spiel. I know where you're going.
I'm just thinking that perhaps some of the stuff, actually, I'm going to make an assumption that maybe I'm wrong, that you did all this.
Yes.
Okay, so I feel like, I don't know that that's our job, but maybe it is, and I guess I need guidance around that, because I feel like that's what the agency's supposed to do, to have vetted all of those things.
We have looked at faculty, we have looked at syllabi, we have looked at course descriptions, we have looked at requirements for completing the courses, yes.
I guess I'm just coming from, if you're asking for my approval, I haven't seen that. And I try to go on the website and access some of that information, and it's not there.
Right.
So it's when, if you're asking for our approval, but, I mean, I understand that you've gone through that, but I just feel responsible. And I feel responsible if a Vermont student signs up, are they going to get what they want out of it? Is the state, if they're going to pay for college credits, are they going to get what they are expected out of it? When I can't even look at a syllabus and see what's expected.
We do our very best in the review process to cover that. We want that. And we're not, the ones that you don't see, we've determined don't meet that. We don't bring them here. They don't appear on your action or consent agenda. The website was brought down specifically so that there wouldn't be any question that they had not started without approval. And that was deliberate. Maybe it was a poor choice to do that, but it was very deliberate and with very good reason. Everything that we looked at gave us full confidence that the quality of the courses met the requirements for our recommendation for approval. Rob has brought with him some, lots of material. There are screenshots. It's basically, the application that we got from him was primarily looking, it was primarily online, but a printed out copy is on my desk and it's this thick. This is the highlight of it, and we have multiple copies, and if you'd like one, we've brought them.
We're
What
perfect.
you want is what we want to give you. I do want to say that the agency takes its responsibility in these approvals very seriously, and we did go through those things.
I think what's unique here is a couple of things. I mean, obviously, the relationship between the agency and the board is different than it was 2 years ago. So we struggle with that a bit. But probably most important in this application, it's new and different. We haven't seen that, and so we have no experience with it. I mean, and I think that's part of what Krista is suggesting. I mean, it's very exciting in a lot of ways, and and part of me says I'm glad you're doing it from Vermont. Let me ask you, this didn't occur to me earlier, but I knew that there was some board members that had some questions on this application. What if we approved it for the 5 years as the application apparently requested, with a review in 2 years, 3 years, with a report back to the board? How would the agency or the company feel about that?
You can certainly do that. In fact, there have been approvals in the past that have been, that have had conditions attached, and I don't recommend that, but you certainly can. We have requested a 5-year approval because that is the chunk of time that allows for some development of the school. However,
What does the
you
agency
can-
do during that 5-year? Do you have any reviews of the?
Yes, we annually will look at financial statements. We do, and this is required by law of all of the post-secondary institutions, we have a responsibility to respond to any complaints that may occur. We will continue to be in touch with Rob and his staff and looking at the development of his board and his framework. It is in our best interest to make sure that that what we recommend approval goes on to do what it said it would do, and that it's successful for all students. And so we don't just approve them and drop them.
All right.
We
Rob,
don't-
what would your reaction be
I
to
don't
mine?
have any problem with that. Ms. Hulling, I totally agree with you. We didn't place those kinds of information, that kind of information publicly, because I also was skirting the issue in terms of what's really recruitment in terms of a student. And you're more than welcome to, and we will send you all the documentation about the classes and the syllabus that you would like for review. And we've told the agency that they can have access to kind of a read-only administrative account. You all can take a look at whatever you would like as we're developing it. We have nothing to hide. We're an open learning organization, and we want the accountability. We want to be good partners with the agency, with state government, and with the other accrediting bodies that we're going to be dealing with.
Great. Bill?
I would like to look at some of that information first, and to Bonnie's question is about whether we should basically defer to the agency. This is the first time that we've dealt with an electronic institution. There's been all kinds of questions about quality control and completion rates among electronic organizations and so forth. So to give this a little more scrutiny, I think is justified, and it's part of our responsibility as checks and balances. Went to the website as well, and I didn't see any courses. I didn't see anything about quality control other than it said that academic freedom and the instructor decides what's in there. Didn't see any programs, didn't see any accreditation, didn't see any financials, didn't see any faculty listing, and which is what you can find on any college and university's website.
You got to admit that we're in a little bit of a unique time frame here, that, they're looking for approval, so.
Well, I guess,
Well,
I
I
mean,
have my own.
when in the application,
Okay, go ahead, Bill.
I would like to look at some of this information ahead of time, and he's offered to put it on the web so that we can take a look-see at it and look
they
at
have
it.
it right
Book's
here.
right here.
I think the book's
Wait,
right here.
Would a
I'm
brief
looking at it.
recess help people to look at?
Probably.
All right. We will take a 10-minute recess and
Can I
people.
say something first? It's about the process, not.
It is about process for me. It's not.
Yes, go ahead.
So I think, I'm at the same comfort level with the rules as I was in other situations, meaning that it's been 20 years since we looked at the rules. And so our authority is actually looking at our rulemaking and what the process is. So if the process needs to be updated to accommodate for new online learning, and what we as a board need to start
Right.
that process like we talked about a couple months ago in other situations. And so the reason I asked about the number, the rules number, is the same thing when we were looking at independent schools, is that the difference being is that we had online the application, which we didn't have in this instance, or maybe it was because we requested it. But I think that typically we just get the approval.
I'll take blame, responsibility, whatever you would. It was on the consent agenda because that
How we've done it in the.
is honestly
Don't,
the
look,
process.
let's not go back there, okay? What would help the conversation, would a 10-minute break and give you opportunity to look through the reports, would that be helpful? Sure. All right, we'll stand in recess until 2:20. 2:20.
And you can review the full application.
I was.
No.
That's right.
Okay.
This will be only a 5-year. Or, sorry, this will be only a 3-year.
Okay.
Bill, Chris, I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and then we're going to call it.
Okay, you've all had an opportunity, and thank you, Rob, for providing all this extra
before you
material. Any further discussion, or is there a motion?
I have a motion.
Lachlan?
Yeah, I would move, as we have here on the green sheet, with one minor alteration, that being that the certificate of approval be for a period of 3 years as opposed to 5, just in compensating for intentions to possibly shift to a degree granting organization, and because this is certainly in breaking new ground. But so yeah, I would move that the State Board of Education approve a certificate of approval for a period of 3 years, commencing April 16, 2014, to Aplerno LLC, Burlington, Vermont, to offer credit for coursework completed through its wholly online educational system.
I'll second that.
That motion has been seconded. Is there discussion?
Yes.
Phil?
Let's talk about a shorter period of time for approval, or a shorter period of time to get and be able to review the other things such as faculty programs and things of that sort. I'm amenable to a motion to allow this to go forward, but I would like some kind of check and balance, because this is the first time that we've done this.
He said 3 years.
I heard 3 years, but I think that's long.
Oh.
I think for example, we should be able to see what faculty is, and we should be able to see online anything that any other college would have in their catalog, pretty much in the draft that it is now.
I would suppose that, or assume that, I think, as considering that they have not launched really, they haven't been given approval or accreditation, that they're not in a position, you said what, the 5 courses have been fully developed, only 5 right now?
Well, we've got 5 ready to run.
Yeah.
The CVs are in the application which we gave to the state. We have in the application, we describe what the marketplace is and the fact that you will all have access, that anyone will have access to our faculty,
Yeah.
to syllabus ahead of time. But sure,
So if this approval begins tomorrow, but I assume that you guys wouldn't be fully up and running. I mean, how long do you think it would take before everything was really open and going?
probably 2 to 3 weeks you'll have all of the more information than you.
And when would classes start, do you think?
I plan on teaching a class
Mhm.
on technology in the classroom, and I'm
Yeah.
going to offer that 3 weeks from the start of our approval process.
Okay, but within a month, let's say, the information that Bill's talking about will be online, most
Sure,
likely.
yes.
Okay. So
Of the faculty members, see, there's also privacy issues here.
Yeah.
Of the faculty members who are offering a class to the public, where the public is paying tuition money to take that class, okay?
Yeah.
You will be able to see the faculty member's name, the CV, the syllabus, and any reviews and publications that they have done through academia.edu. I mean, I'll provide all of that
Yeah.
information to you all.
Rebecca, did you wish to add something to this
I was
conversation?
just going to say, I think we always have the option, if it came out that there was something really wrong, we would always have the option of going back and visiting, but we have a process in place, and I would encourage us to follow our process and to start, and to let it go.
And any approval can be revoked at the will of the board.
At any time.
As
And
well.
if you saw, if you saw, heaven forbid, in this case, as in any other case, it's not unique. I mean, I think we're applying the same standard to this institution we would be to any institution. What's different here is the mode of delivery. So this is more like the VTVLC of post-secondary for us, and it is new, and it is different. But you would always have the opportunity to come in if there was any grounds for belief that whatever was happening here wasn't meeting the needs of its students.
Okay, the motion before us is the State Board of Education approve a certificate of approval for a period of 3 years commencing April 16th, 2014.
I thought Stacy had her hand.
I'm sorry.
I'm okay. You can keep going.
Other questions, comments? If not, I'll call the vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
I hear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to 1?
2.
2?
Two.
Okay.
So,
So 5.
5 to 2.
5 to 2. Congratulations.
Bill.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think,
Actually, can I say what I was gonna say now?
yes.
Now I can say.
I think you can keep all that material with us. That-
You sure you guys don't want to keep?
You're
You're welcome to.
Yeah.
You also can keep this if you like.
I'm just gonna keep this one if that's okay.
Okay.
So I think that, I just wanted to comment that I think, as
We'll see you soon.
it was obvious, this illuminated, I think, a couple different things that I think unfortunately Oplerno and Rob maybe got to be the
Recipients?
recipient of, and also, sorry, Kathy, is that your name? And Kathy. But I think maybe the two things to take away for me is that the, just our need to stay very proactive. So things like online learning or whatever the new things are that are coming, we're gonna need to be actively thinking about what is our process, and then maybe perhaps asking the agency when encountering something new, if maybe more detail could be provided to us about the process that goes through for approval, just so we're better, because I think the last thing we want to do is do twice the work that you've already done, or not really value the work that was put into it. But I think part of it is that either a lot of us being new, or this being a totally new concept, we are scrutinizing the process. Or we are not sure, we're scrutinizing the applicant when maybe what we want to ask is more questions of the process.
Yes, I would agree with that, and I would, I guess, suggest in the end that when we get particularly something new like this, that a little more detail in what the agency's process is in the
You
review.
had already said it.
I think I'm repeating, but that's one of the things that struck me as well.
It's being a rubber stamp. Like you want to know what's going on, and before you put your name to it. And I guess that's where I'm comfortable, and that's why I voted no.
Okay.
Is that I wasn't comfortable saying because I didn't know enough. That not enough information was provided, and then I get 10 minutes to look at this binder that's 6 inches high. It's a little late.
Okay, moving on to item I, which should be a little easier, the consent agenda, which contains only the minutes of the last meeting.
Oh. You never know.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
The motion has been made by Lachlan and seconded by Sean Marie to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the consent agenda has been approved. We'll move on to a discussion of the CTE overview and update.
Oh, we are way behind.
Oh, that's right.
John Fisher, skip out on this one too. Oh, there you are. You were on the agenda for the last item too.
Yeah, I don't want to be a rubber stamp either. Not my nature.
It's not about being a rubber stamp.
See,
It's
those,
not-
I think that's the first, like,
I mean, not that, you know what I
Gentlemen,
mean, but
Okay, if I
bring
may,
us up to date.
I'll introduce things while Jay is getting set up. I'm Tom Alderman. I'm the director of the Secondary and Adult Division, which is where Career and Technical Education is housed. I'll mention that John Fisher continues to serve as the state director for CTE, and Jay Ramsey is the work group leader for the CTE work group. The Secretary asked us to give you a little bit of an update on CTE, and in particular, as an example, she wanted us to talk about her recent visit to North Country, and the fact that she was impressed with some of the innovative things going on there, and as well as at other centers around the state. So Jay's put together a presentation that talks about that and generally brings you up to date about what is going on in the world of career and technical education.
Maybe we'll have a presentation. All right.
Oh, it's Prezi. I like Prezi. Have you seen presentations on Prezi? Have you seen Prezi?
And part of our intention is to impress you with our new technology here.
If they move too fast, they make me microphones.
Students love Prezi.
I'm still always trying to figure out how to do one.
Yeah.
So as Tom said, I'm Jay Ramsey. I'm the CTE work group coordinator, and I've been here at the agency since 2011. And so I'm just going to go through this with you. Hopefully you don't get motion sick. Prezi zooms in and zooms out, so if you just need to close your eyes and lean back and relax, that's okay. So, what is CTE? In the past, it had been called vocational education. Some people still refer to it as voc ed. Some people talk about it as trade school. It's not that. So what is it that we're doing? We're working to prepare students to be successful in the 21st century. And with voc ed, you think people are not headed to college, they're training for a job and they're going to be in that job. That's not what we do. We certainly can do that. We're interested in students that are headed to college or into the workforce, or into the workforce then to college. So what I'm going to talk to you about today, we're going to start with success stories first, and then we'll talk a little bit about the system and how it works, give you a little bit of information about the students that experience CTE, talk about some of their outcomes, and then the projects that the agency is involved in supporting those tech centers. So, success stories. This is a map of the state divided up into service regions. The little legend there, the pink triangle identifies our STEM equity pipeline pilot sites, and that is a project through the National Alliance for Partnerships in Equity, and it's a NSF-funded grant project through them. There are 10 other states that are participating in this. So that's North Country, Barry, Hannaford, and the Center for Technology in Essex. The GEARS are Tech Centers That Work sites. Tech Centers That Work is a program through the Southern Regional Education Board. So it's basically a school improvement initiative focused on tech centers. And these are voluntary participants, and we have given grants to support those schools. And the light bulb and the check marks are sites where we've given innovation grants to the tech centers, and that's a fund that we maintain. It's a combination of state and federal monies. The centers have to apply for it, and it's if they want to develop a new program, they want to expand their program of study in an existing program, they would access the innovation grants. So, look at this. What's the difference? All right.
Color.
Color, yes. People doing a specific task on an assembly line
No
is
people.
in 1913, and to a modern day manufacturing plant assembling cars, we've got robotics. And so it's mechatronics is really what that's called, mechanization and robotics. And so we want to train students to learn how to operate these robots, not how to screw a bolt onto a lug nut to assemble a car. This is just kind of a generalization here. So as Tom mentioned, I visited North Country Career Center with Secretary Holcomb a few weeks ago for her show that she's doing out on the road to highlight the good things that are going on in technical centers. So we saw some things that we'd expect to see: culinary arts program, automotive program. You see something here maybe that you don't expect to see, which is a screenshot from Twitter. The technical education team is on Twitter, so when we go visit, we like to send out pictures to the world about the good things that are going on in tech centers. So here you have Adam. Yes, Adam is the automotive student, and what he said to me when I was there was, if I hadn't discovered the Career Center, I would have dropped out of high school last year, and now I'm thinking about going to college. Erin is a baking student, and she's going to be going to NECI to get a baking certificate. So some things that you don't expect to see. There are several female students here that are involved in technical programs. Jillian is the one in the upper left, and she's enrolled in the mechatronics program, which is a program that was started with an innovation grant. And she's interested in engineering and renewable energies. So we have the swath of pictures along the bottom are from the mechatronics program. The two in the corner are students learning to build robots. So we have a female student talking to Secretary Holcomb and programming. So she's going through troubleshooting in the programming of the little robot. And then there were two male students that had built this little robot. If you've seen the Roomba, that's a vacuum cleaner, it goes around the floor, it bumps into things and moves. That's what this robot is. So the kids had a kit, they built it, they programmed it, and they would put their hand in front of it, it would touch their hand and change direction. So they were learning some of the basics about mechatronics, robotics being part of that.
Because one of these kids said the most extraordinary thing. I said, what did you learn from taking this? And he said, well, and then he looked at the machine. He said, they used to hire people to do what this machine does, and I realized that now you get hired to program that machine to do those things. And it was such a, he's only 9th grader in some kind of exploratory, or 10th grader in an exploratory program, but he'd already made that connection and was already thinking about what that meant for him moving forward in school.
And in conversations with some of the students, it's a process of realizing what they don't want to do, as well as discovering what they do want to do. So I said some of the things that you wouldn't expect to hear. If it weren't for the Career Center, I would have dropped out. Now I'm thinking about college. I'll be graduating high school and finishing the program with 9 credits. So we wouldn't say that about vocational education. We're going to say it about career technical education. So we're preparing students for college and career. We've got connections to business and industry and colleges. We require new programs to utilize a program of study model where the teachers and the administrators have identified what courses a student would need to get into the program, and also what industry recognized credential they're going to have or is going to be available to them when they leave, what dual enrollment courses are available to them, and any articulation agreements that would exist with a college. So, Linden Institute, I tried to cherry pick, knowing where all of you are from, to highlight things in your region.
Very smart.
These are just highlights of things that I've heard about and witnessed. Linden Institute serves the St. Johnsbury, Linden region in the Northeast Kingdom, which is where I live. St. Johnsbury Academy and Linden Institute both jointly operate a technical center there. Linden Institute has a collaboration between their physics instructor and the manufacturing program, aligned with the Common Core and the next generation science standards. And the Berry Tech Center down the road here, they have a pre-tech teacher. So pre-tech is an intro class available to 9th and 10th graders and 11th and 12th graders, but it's intended to be a preview of the program. They have that teacher at Cabot, so offsite. They're developing a new sustainable agriculture program. They're participating in the STEM equity pipeline, which is, I mentioned before, the goal of that is to increase the participation and completion rates of girls and young women in STEM-related programs in the tech centers. And then they pioneered work with the Southern Regional Education Board and the Tech Centers That Work program. They were the first tech center in the state to sign on with Tech Centers That Work, and now we have 4 centers that are signed on with them. Riverbend Tech Center, Riverbend in Bradford, Vermont, is implementing the Project Lead the Way Biosciences curriculum. They're switching all of their programs to project-based learning, and this is their first year of work with SREB. Wyndham Regional in Brattleboro. There's too many B's at the bottom of the state. They're also implementing Project Lead the Way Biosciences.
That really only proves what a lot of us in southern Vermont think. You folks in northern Vermont don't care about it.
I care. I want to get it right. That's why I hesitated.
Carol, I want to make sure that's in the minutes.
Wyndham Regional also started work this year with SREB. Wyndham is implementing Project Lead the Way Biosciences curriculum as a result of an innovation grant that they received last year. The Southwest Career Development Center is developing the state's first sustainable food systems program. We've connected them with resources through the Farm to Plate network. So we're supporting their efforts to create this program that links agriculture and culinary and some other program areas. And they're collaborating with regional business and industry to create the region's first makerspace, which is a creative learning environment. I think I saw John has left the building, but he tweeted today about creative learning environments. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. Stafford Technical Center in Rutland is implementing a STEM academy in partnership with other schools in the region, which is a unique model that I personally would like to see replicated in other areas of the state. They also have a unique element to all of their programs in that there is a student entrepreneurship component to every program. So what does that mean? That means there's a little business aspect of it to all their programs. Hannaford Career Center in Middlebury is implementing a STEM academy across a number of their programs. They are heavily involved in the Farm to Plate network, and they are starting to begin work with the Tech Centers That Work program, and they're also a STEM Equity Pipeline pilot site. The Burlington Tech Center Health Science program has a waiting list. Last time I heard, I think it was 2 years long. They have multiple dual enrollment options. This program gives students the most dual enrollment credits of any of the health careers programs in the state. And they offer the state's only approved aviation technology program. The Northwest Technical Center, they're competing in the first FTC's first technical challenge robotic competition. They were in the final round last week, I believe. And they also fielded a team with more girls than the out-of-state LadyBots team, which I think is remarkable for them. They're a small center, and of the larger centers, this center was able to field a team with lots of girls on it. Cold Hollow Career Center in Enosburg is the smallest center in the state, and I wanted to highlight a policy that they've implemented in the last couple of years, which is have an academic teacher on their program advisory committees. The rules that we have don't require an academic teacher, and we've been talking about that as a way to ensure that the academics offered in the technical programs are rigorous. And this is a way for the technical center teachers to learn about the Common Core from these other teachers. So I would like to see that replicated in other areas of the state as well. So what you got from that really fast overview, the big idea is that we're engaging students through contextualized learning, that there is integration of technical skill development and rigorous academics, that we're developing 21st century skills, and read into that the transferable skills, because people we know are going to have 4 to 6 different careers in their lifetime. So we want to develop those skills that can move with someone from job to job. And we're graduating students that are college and career ready. So what I want to say about this is sort of the ideal state where we want everything to be like this. everything is not currently like that, so I highlighted some of the great things that are going on around the state. I noticed on the board up here, there's a lot about equity, so that's kind of on the list of things at the end of my presentation that I wanted to mention.
I have one question that I want to ask, and this is probably a good time to ask it when I see the 4 big ideas up there. And maybe this, as I think about it, this might be a dated question. This might be more vocational oriented than it is technical center.
Right.
I didn't see anything, and I don't hear a lot in our area, Brattleboro, about connections between business and the tech center.
Mm-hmm.
You know, are we training our students so they can go out and get a job? Is that a focus at all, or is that old thinking? And that we ought to train them so they can get a job anyplace?
I think that's a great question. All of the programs in all of the centers are, by rule, supposed to have what's called a program advisory committee, made up of representatives from business and industry from that region.
Last I heard, it was either non-existent or wasn't much help in Wyndham Central. But
And so I think, I have from the conferences that I've gone to in the last week or two, I've been thinking about what's the issue here with how these program advisory committee works, how they don't work maybe, or how they do work. So how do you engage business and industry in a conversation about education when that's not something that they know about? They can tell a teacher what they'd like to see in a student when they leave a program. In some areas of the state, we have really active, high-functioning advisory boards, advisory committees for programs, and in other areas, we don't. So is that a function of not caring or not trying? I don't think so. I wonder if it's a function of time and availability of the business and industry partners to come together and have a conversation about this. It's also, as we have teachers retire, we have new teachers coming in who they're learning about their job, they're from business and industry as well, they're trying to take care of the students, and they're trying to figure out how do you get a program advisory committee to meet and be effective and provide useful feedback. So I think it's kind of a mix of concerns out there, and so I always ask myself the question, what is it that we can do to help with this? and you know, the part of it is it engaging with the teachers about how to make these work? Is it pulling the teachers together to talk about their program advisory committees and what's working, what's not working, and support each other? So I've been doing that with our business teachers, and for the last year, pulling them together every 3 months, basically, to talk about the different aspects of their program and what they do for students, so they can learn from each other. I can certainly talk and talk and talk, but I'm not the expert. They're the experts, and they can learn from each other. And we have to create opportunities for them to come together. And the Tech Center directors realize that, so they're working to have a statewide conversation with the superintendents to identify common professional development days within the technical centers so that all the teachers can come together to talk. And so they're running with this idea, and their summer conference will have strands for professional learning communities so that the teachers can learn how professional learning communities model works and integrate that into their meetings. So I hear the concern. I recognize there's work to be done, and I think we're working on it.
Question. I think that was a really good question, because I'm actually a board member from the Hannaford Career Center. I've been since about 10 years now. And advisories are really, really critical. One of the things that we've discovered is with declining in population in the schools, that sometimes the kids are being pitted between staying in their sending school and heading down to the career center. And what kind of work is the agency doing to help alleviate the anxiety from both perspectives?
I think That's also a difficult question to answer. I would like to think that with flexible pathways and requiring personal learning plans for all students, and mentioning that CTE has a place in there, that would increase enrollments. I think also that what I hear from the directors is that the way the financing works, that there's potentially a disincentive. So school is going to send a student to a technical center, and that tuition money follows that student. So across the state, you all know declining enrollments. How do we fund everything and keep it moving? So I think that's a ball of wax that I don't know that I have the answer to. Do you have?
I'll just add that I would argue that Act 77 envisions a much easier access to career and technical education. Currently, there are some policy and funding obstacles to that easy access. And I think if we're going to be faithful to the vision of Act 77 and EQS, we have to address those obstacles.
Is that rules or law?
I think it's a combination.
Can you hold on a minute, John?
I would just add, nationally, that's a question going around from a number of pressure points. We have a fairly unique system called shared time regional CTE programs, where the sending schools, send the students at their will. I think the funding of that following the student in some sectors is viewed as a disincentive, but we haven't had much luck finding a better funding source. Act 77, I think, helps reinforce that we said in there one of the 4 elements of flexible learning is CTE, plus work-based learning is the second one, virtual learning, and then the college experiences. Nationally, what we're seeing also is a concern that the new Smarter Balance and Common Core, if we allow that to narrow our focus and narrow the curriculum and teach to the test, it will further put pressure on CTE and some of these other flexible learning. So we need to guard against that and make sure that we're talking about a comprehensive educational experience that follows Act 77, and sort out the rest as it goes along. So it's I think what Jay's been doing with the Career Centers too, to emphasize integrated academics, puts boards and principals' minds at ease that when a student goes to the Career Center, they're having a robust experience that actually helps them when they get to those assessment points, as opposed to hurting them.
Krista?
I'm just wondering, so I know some of my students, they come in, they're really interested in going to the tech centers, but since they're full day commitments, it's hard because they have they want to be in both places. And I was wondering if you've been to any programs that sort of mitigates that by allowing for part-time in a career center, and just what you've seen, because I know we have a half-time program, and they go for half the day, but even that, it's difficult because the programs are limited, and so what's offered half days.
What region are you from?
Well, I worked at Lamoille Union,
Okay.
and that's where I live, and then I teach in South Burlington.
Okay.
And so they go to the Burlington Tech or Essex Tech. And it's just different programs, and just wondering across the state. I mean, the ones at South Burlington have more options because there are 2 tech centers very close. But so having this available to students that they don't have to make the full commitment for a full day. But are there other places that offer?
Well, we do have, so if you look at the slide here, that there are half-day programs in other areas of the state, part-time programs. So Cold Hollow and Enosburg Falls have part-time programs. And I'm trying to think, in Brattleboro, they have kind of a similar model that they're treated more like courses, I believe, than full programs, so students can kind of move around. And actually, when I show some data on the next couple of slides, we'll be able to see that students are participating in programs, but they're not
That's what we do.
necessarily finishing them or completing them is how we refer to it. So it's an interesting opportunity for us to, I think, figure out how can we use technology to assist in the delivery of the technical programs, recognizing that a lot of learning happens in the shop environments. So you think about automotive, you're doing hands-on stuff with cars. Culinary arts, part of the learning is putting your hands on stuff and mixing things together. But some of the learning doesn't have to take place in that environment. So how can we, and similar to this conversation about the online college, how do we move in this direction toward blended learning with career technical education? It would definitely increase the opportunities for more students to participate. And we know that when students can participate in CTE, they're more likely to graduate than their peers who haven't. So I see the need to figure it out.
So why don't you, Lachlan?
Yeah, one thing about Brattleboro real quick is that because the Career Center and the high school are on a combined campus, and we also have a particularly large radius of, we have students coming from New Hampshire to our tech center, so they come from all over. But so the school, the high school and the Career Center are kind of partnered, so you can take one block at the Career Center, but instead of getting back on the bus and driving to Hinsdale or Townsend, you can then take your other 3 classes at BUHS. And a lot of students who are basically looking for school choice will take one class at the Career Center that's one block and then take 3 classes at the high school. Or you can have, if you're a student at the high school, you can have a 2-block class or 1-block class. You know, forestry, for example, or automotive, there are 2 blocks. So then you can do that, and then your other 2 classes could be in the high school, or they could be other Career Center classes. So there's some on your graduation requirements, you can't, you can substitute one, so you have to take social studies 1, 2, and 3, and then you have to take one more or something, it's science, you have to take biology and introduction to physical science, then 1 more. Or 2 more, and then you can't use Career Center classes for both of them, so you have to take chemistry or physics, or 1 in school science program, but you can use 1 at the Career Center, so there's some crossover.
And you're, I think, referring to the embedded credits that the state board has identified by program, whether it's math or science or art.
Why don't you continue with your presentation now that we've interrupted?
No, it's a good conversation. So students in grades 11 and 12 are entitled to technical education. If they're in 9 or 10, it's optional to participate in the pre-tech courses. Students, as it says, enroll in full or half-day programs, and the programs are organized by career clusters and pathways. And so these are the career clusters. There are 16 of them, and I think there are 72 pathways. We don't have programs in all of these career cluster areas, but I see this as a great opportunity for guidance counselors to use with general ed students in 7th grade to understand how the world is kind of organized as they think about what they might want to do, what they're interested in. So, how many students benefit from CTE in Vermont is a big question, and I'm going to try to be as clear as I possibly can. In 2012 to 13 school year, there were 24,628 students enrolled in high school. Of those, 12,125 were enrolled in grades 11 and 12. So in CTE, for that same school year, 5,345 students participated in technical education in some way, shape, somehow. So what that looks like to me is 1 in 4 students were in pre-tech. What it says to me is that 3 in 10, approximately, participated in CTE. So we had 3,805 11th and 12th graders in CTE. 61% were male, 39% were female. 26.42% were receiving special ed services, whether it's an IEP or they're on a 504 plan. So that gives you a picture of who's participating. So here's some AOE jargon for you. Participants, concentrators, and completers. So a participant is someone who maybe took one course and didn't finish. A concentrator is someone who has completed at least 50% of the required sequence of instruction. And a completer is someone who the school has said, you've got all the proficiencies that you need, you're finished with the program. All right, so 37% of our enrollments were concentrators. 31% of those concentrators were completers. So this says to me that students are going to the tech center, participating in programs, but they're not finishing. Possibly because of the time commitment, possibly because family situation got in the way, possibly, there are all sorts of reasons why, I think. On another note, we allow students to be enrolled in more than one program, so 592 students took advantage of that. Our evidence suggests that students who participate in CTE are graduating at a higher rate than their non-CTE peers. So I didn't provide a specific percentage up here because it depends on how you ask the question and what you're comparing it to. We can ask specific questions and get to that if you are interested in it, but what we have seen in the data suggests that they graduate at a higher rate. We also do 3-year follow-up surveys with students. So the most recent information we have is from the 2009 to 10 school year. Students finishing programs there. 59% of them were involved in a related field. So they're employed in a related field, they're in the military, or they're in post-secondary studying in a related field to what the program that they finished. 36% are involved in an unrelated field, 3.8% are unemployed, and 0.67 were incarcerated or deceased.
Do you ever ask the question where they're employed? Are they employed in the state of Vermont?
I did ask that be added to our data collection for starting this year. Are they at home in Vermont or did they go somewhere else? I think it's an important piece of data that we should have.
In terms of demographics, they seem rather limited. I'm sort of curious about no ELLs, no SES. Just wondering, seems like something worth tracking.
Yeah, we do have that information available, and I think it is limited in some areas. Burlington is the sort of example where you have lots of ELL students in the general ed programs.
But I do wonder about the SES. That's sort of a statewide issue.
Yes, and that information is hard for us to collect. So socioeconomic status is hard for us to gather because we use free and reduced price lunch as the flag for it, and we know when you're in high school, that's not something that you necessarily want to be associated with. So it's hard really for us to get an accurate picture of that particular piece of information. But we do know that it affects learning.
Yeah.
And I'd like to try to find a way to collect that information, but I just...
Get it in middle school.
Okay.
They're only marginally more likely to hand in their forms.
So I'll zoom out and just talk at a high level about some of the projects that the agency is involved in and supports. This is not an all-inclusive list, only representative. So if we start at the, thanks for the lights again, the STEM equity pipeline, I think, did you?
I mentioned that you'd been.
Okay, so NAEP is the National Alliance for Partnerships in Equity. It's a national organization that every state is a member of, and its interest is in increasing equity and diversity in and among CTE programs. So they have been in existence for 35 years, and we just came back from their Professional Development Institute, and So I'm now the president-elect of this organization. I'm the first male president-elect in their entire history, so it's great for Vermont. I'm proud, if I can say that. Can I be proud of myself?
Yes.
Proud of Vermont.
Proud of Vermont. I'm proud of the 13 people that came with us. I'm proud of the 4 pilot sites that were able to go and attend. So we're out there. We're trying to set the bar high. We're trying to make sure that we have access to professional development and resources to help our students. So the STEM Equity Pipeline is one of those. I'm the state lead on that project. We're participating and providing opportunities for professional development and professional learning communities with the career clusters and the program teachers, as I mentioned before. I'm interested in outreach and training and presentations about the career clusters to general ed. I think it'll help them. Makerspaces and FIRST Robotics. This is the tweet from John about playful learning. Today, I saw that. So a makerspace is a great opportunity for that. It's look it up if you don't know what it's about. There's a great place in Burlington called The Generator that just opened. That's a makerspace. Southern Regional Education Board and the Tech Centers That Work program. Project Lead the Way and other project-based learning resources. We manage the innovation grants, which is an allocation from the legislature to replace equipment, or sorry, that's the equipment grant. Innovation grants is a combination of federal and state money to develop new programs. We're participating in an industry alignment index at the North Country Career Center to make sure that their programs are aligned with the needs of business and industry and with secondary education. We're developing end of program assessments, and our imagining performance assessments are on the horizon for some of the programs. And we also administer the federal Perkins grants to the technical centers. And here's what I think some of our opportunities are. Creating educational equity amongst like programs around the state. So just because I'm a student at the smallest center in Enosburg Falls doesn't mean that I shouldn't have access to the same kind of program and the curriculum at a larger center. So we're thinking about how we can do that. That we're ensuring academic rigor in CTE programs by looking at the rules around embedded credits. How do we start talking about integrated credits? Creating a CTE funding model that ensures all students have access to technical education, that doesn't create this actual or perceived disincentive, that we're supporting adoption of high standards that reflect 21st century educational and industry needs. We're all going to go to work. All of our kids are going to be employed someday. So that's an important part of it, and that we're implementing career clusters model and gender equity training in support of personalized learning plan implementation.
I would, I'm going back to my earlier theme, that, suggest to you that there's another opportunity of working more closely with the business community. And not only would that provide, good jobs for the people, for the kids that you're educating, but, would help the economic situation in the state of Vermont. I hear all over the place in different things I do that employers can't find qualified employees. And I just, one of the reasons I asked for this presentation a while ago was thinking that a bigger connection between the business community and the career centers might be beneficial all the way around.
Yes.
So, and I look at your presentation and it's educationally oriented, which I fully appreciate. But I think a little reaching out might serve public policy interests in Vermont on a broader scale.
What data do we have on that question? That's a good question. I get the impression that our tech centers are putting out enough people, but there's not enough jobs for the people. What do you guys have data on this?
Well, we use Department of Labor data when we're approving new programs. But as far as how what jobs students are going into when they leave the technical centers, that information is sort of on a 3-year delay.
Oh, I see. And you don't know whether it's career-related or not.
We have an idea of is it in a related field to what they were studying or not, whether it's in military life or whether they're in the military or civilian life.
And as we develop and populate the longitudinal data system, we will have a better idea of what students are doing after they leave K-12 or CTE.
Sure.
But that's a little ways down the road.
In March of last year, we had IBM came and they had some data on students they had hired out of CTE programs in Vermont and remediation levels and stuff that they had. They were sending a certain amount of students to Vermont Tech in CCV to do remediation, and not all those students came out of CTE programs. But so they had some data, but I don't remember seeing anything else that's more concrete than that.
Pretty amazing that you remember when they were here.
We were in the Vermont College of Fine Arts.
All right.
Yeah,
all
that's,
right.
I remember.
I remember that.
See the younger minds on the board.
Ooh, that was a low blow.
There goes your retirement card.
Is he riding with you today?
No,
No.
that's why he's
I
feeling
thought ahead of this.
that he's able to make these comments. Sorry to interrupt again.
That's okay.
Chumley.
So one of the interesting things over the years that I was on the board is that what Mark mentioned is something that's been talked about for years, that the high school doesn't want to send students to a tech center because not only does it costs twice as much, if not more than that. Their cost per pupil is much higher. Plus, your numbers there, I'm assuming, are actual students and not FTEs.
Right, actual students.
Because you didn't preface your, now I'm going to explain maybe how many students, because, but one of the things that was really helpful was for high school guidance counselors to attend the programs, because so often there's a misconception of what happens in these programs, and there's a lot of embedded work, and I'm not exactly sure, I don't remember, in terms of embedded credits, the state says that some are embedded credits, but local districts can actually approve a course as an embedded credit if it meets certain criteria in their own local district. So we would, we had a strange one down there where the cosmetology class, you could get credit in health because there was actually a certified health teacher teaching the cosmetology class. So there's all sorts of ways for, different kinds of certifications. But I think often the disconnect between what happens in the tech centers and what happens at the high school needs to somehow be bridged. And I know that one of our guidance, the head of the guidance department had one year asked each of them to rotate through before signups for the next year. And it worked incredibly well in terms of that. Also, many school districts will do it, they'll have a policy that if you do a program or a long block, they can take the rest of their classes, if there's room, at the high school next to or near the tech center. So there's I think there's the other thing I just want to editorialize on is that there are lots of requirements of our students, and if somebody is on a track to take AP Physics, they may not be able to take the medical professions class. And you have, a lot of schools have singletons in terms of the AP classes or even the medical professions. And so you end up, as hard as you try, you have competing scheduling issues.
Yeah.
With bigger school districts and more opportunities, that may go away.
So I was going to say, it seems like, talking to friends of mine, especially who take more classes at the Career Center, that they have a hard time even, and I don't think they're necessarily complain. I don't think this is necessarily a complaint, but just an observation that it's near impossible to complete a program, because then if that's if you take criminal or Whereas if you take the public, I think the public safety one or something at BUHS is like firefighting and criminal justice, something like that, and they're both a block, the first block in the morning, all year long. So then you basically, it's like a 2-year commitment to do it. Whereas like some of them might want to say, I'm going to take forestry, which is 2 blocks, so then you have like a 50% chance of bouncing out one of the other ones. And so like, and that's something that students at the high school, not even Career Center, experience, is that it's impossible to ever take even like half the classes you want because of the block scheduling. I don't know how many Career Center high schools utilize block scheduling, but I think it's like, you know, that's a complication in completing a program, is just scheduling.
Yeah, I believe that that's what contributes to a third of the students actually complete.
Right, and also that, like, you know, they might take forestry and then, you know, that's I don't know what else would be in that program, but then like, okay, like, yeah, that's kind of cool, I'm going to do this one next or that one next, or, you know, just
Forestry 1, forestry 2.
yeah.
That's what it is.
Okay.
Simple
Thank you.
enough.
Thank you all very much.
Just one final question to kind of follow up a little bit what Sean Marie was talking about in regards to guidance counselors, because that's been one of the challenges that I think we found is sending guidance counselors, you know, really up to date on what's in the classes and so forth. And I wonder, as we're getting into personal learning plans, if there's a thought on how to start, because guidance counselors in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, which we always felt that's where you have to really plant the seed to get kids to CTE, because they have to start planning out their courses, even though they have no clue what they want to do at that time, most of them. If there's a plan to, or what the mechanism is to really, you know, get, you know, guidance, because I know the job of a guidance counselor in the middle school is different than the job of guidance counselor in the high school. And once they get to the high school, if you don't have an advocate, and that guidance counselor thinks, well, you know, we're gonna track it, you know, post-secondary, and maybe it's not gonna be through CTE.
It's not just guidance counselors. As we move into the PLP era, it may not be guidance counselors who are playing that role of helping students develop and manage their plans. So all of the people who are in that role need to be well informed about the CTE option and all the other options that may become elements of a student's plan.
Yeah, good point, Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good conversation, good report, and you're doing great work. Just connect with business a little more.
You should hear what the businesses
Make
say about
classes.
some of the programs, though. When we went to North Country, there was a representative of a local hospital.
Yes.
And they were incredibly complimentary of the work the school was doing.
Yes, I think,
It probably depends on where you are, it probably depends on the
does.
business, and
if you have all small, sort of mom and pop employers, that looks different than if you
Yeah.
have an IBM in your
Yep.
region.
Yep.
And just as we have culinary kids cycle through our restaurant Tuesdays through Thursdays, and we had a kid last week who, in the course, you know, they come with a bunch of questions that they have to get done, and so I always have a bunch of questions asked them as well. And usually it's, you know, how did you end up taking the course? Why'd you take the course? And, you know, are you going to continue in this industry? And this one particular kid, and he was really quite good. He said, "Oh, I have no interest in going into this industry. But, and, you know, what are you planning on doing after school?" He goes, "Well, I'm going to take a few years off. I'm going to head out to Colorado." But one of the things he did say, why he took culinary, was because you can always get a job in culinary. You know, you can always be, and he was smart. You can always, you know, I won't be unemployed. I may not be making a lot of money depending upon where I am, but I'll always be able to be employed. And I thought that was pretty insightful for,
Yeah.
you know, a 17-year-old kid.
They are insightful.
So we're doing some things right around. They're getting the message.
Precision, probably a good one, runs.
I think the other thing that was just so impressive to me
Well,
about the North Country
yeah, and
folk
that's
was how
somebody I have
intentional
in
students
mind
were
when they
about
said
how
they
the
can't hire
certifications they
anybody.
were getting in high school would advance their post-secondary career. So I talked to a number of students who were using their LNAs to pay for college because their long-term goal was to be an RN. And they knew if they couldn't work in, you know, on the way, they wouldn't get there. But
Yeah,
they'd really thought
that's-
it out.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Okay,
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
on to item K. board priorities, and which is something we've kind of been ignoring for the last few months because we've been consumed by legislation and.
Hadn't been a priority.
And, yes. I don't know really how you want to approach this, other than maybe to identify, starting at the next meeting, where we should start getting back to this.
You mean the presentations?
Presentations, back to what policies we ought to be looking at, either revising or creating.
Like, I guess at our December meeting, we had Hunger Free Vermont, and we never really followed up with that. We got a presentation, but never got to talk about it as a board.
Right, we had actually gone on record talking about wanting to support, like, free lunch for
lunch,
everybody. And that kind of-
Yeah.
That's right.
Right, and I just didn't know if we want to revisit that and maybe a stronger stance, or.
Which priority would that come under? What do you-
It's priority 1, I think.
It's on achievement gap, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, I see it
Yep.
hitting up here as well. It leads to equity.
Right.
And I think Rebecca mentioned it earlier, it's as much about after school and in between when school is open for kids as well. And Hunger Free Vermont's really, strong with that. And it's about identifying communities. I know they've been down in Addison County now for the last year. I think it's been about a year now where they've created a hunger council in Addison County, and it's amazing how many different groups come together as part of that makeup of that committee. And one of the real strong pushes right now is to get all the schools to really get that free and reduced count up to 50% or above, because that allows some federal funding to be released for, after-school programs and summer programs and so forth, which is really, really critical.
One thing about that our high school struggles with is every elementary school and middle school that feeds into BUHS has a free and reduced lunch rate between like 40 and 55%, but the high school's at 33.
It's exactly what we're talking about.
And so that also
That's what Bonnie was,
because
Bonnie
students
just
don't want to
Systems
claim
issue.
that they are qualify for free and reduced
And
lunch.
the feds won't let you just move them up. You
Right.
have to do a new application every year.
Because their status could change.
Right.
One of the things may also be helping them be aware of other benefits that they're entitled to beyond food,
Right.
because there are other benefits.
Yeah, there's like an insurance thing. I remember getting that in the mail. I don't know.
And there's also, and you can get special deals from Comcast. I mean, there's all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And maybe what we could do is profile some of those.
So you want to put this on the agenda for the May meeting, and between Carol and Rebecca and myself just a little bit to figure out how to, what would be good presentations and where we might want to go on this?
Are you talking number 1?
Well, I was talking
The
about
last bullet.
The last one and under goal 1.
Well, and number two seems to be moving along pretty well with the presentations that'll be going on around the
Right,
state.
right.
And
Going back to number 1 a second, I keep scratching my head, not coming up with a good answer to that, is what should we be doing about the achievement gap that we're not? And it's like we go after solving the symptoms of poverty, but we're not really getting at it. I think expanding the summer programs and the after-school programs and the early education programs are obvious good things to be doing. But I wonder if there's something more we should be doing with human services, with jobs, with something else. I think it's bigger than just us, but I don't know the answers.
But the first thing that comes to mind for me, Bill, when you say that, especially when you talk about summer break, is calendar 2.0, and the what was driving that, and I don't think we want to get out in front of that necessarily, but maybe there's, but
Oh, why don't we try consolidation for a non-controversial one?
but that lends itself to structure, which is structure that's more beneficial for kids, especially kids that or, you know, on the gap. And so, at some point, maybe that should, and, you know, somehow we should be on that radar. I don't know what that looks like, I don't have any solutions, but I know that's where 2.0 was going in large part.
Well, why don't we, for the May meeting, focus on priority one, get back on the achievement gap, and try to put together a presentation or two that might lead us someplace. Not just on the free school food, but something broader than that.
And if we could involve some human services people, and I'd leave this up to Rebecca as to who would be it, and getting into the prevention end as opposed to the taking care of symptoms.
Are you talking about prevention in the proximal or the ultimate sense? I mean, you're talking about early intervention starting at prenatal care?
Yeah.
I mean, because that's the kind of work that we're addressing in partnership with AHS through some of the Race to the Top and the early learning work.
Okay.
But a lot of that is in AHS, and I could have them come speak to the board. I'm not sure I understand it. We can't create jobs, but we can work with parents to provide support services and things like that. Is that what you're asking? Yeah. So we could lay out that scope of work, talk about the scope of work that's going on in that arena.
That would actually be really helpful.
Yeah, it'd be very
Okay.
helpful, yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking.
Because that really is, I mean, it's that systemic that we'd want to be looking that deeply.
Can we narrow it to can we focus 0 to 5 before they get to us? What's in place?
That'd be really
I'd like
helpful.
to hear what we're doing and concentrate on that, but I'd also like to have some blue sky time with some of the human services types where we can just have a free-floating, what about, what if kind of conversation.
With the intention of us not just having a great intellectual conversation, but leading someplace where we might be a little more clear on a policy or a direction we'd like to go. We meaning the state board.
Sounds good.
Okay. I've got one other thing to bring up before we adjourn the meeting, but I want to see if anyone else has anything they'd like to bring up.
Oh, can we clarify the dates for the retreat?
Oh, yes, yes.
I thought we usually do
And
that
the
like
meeting
every-
place of our next meeting?
Yes.
We've already established it.
And we're meeting here in May on,
Somewhere in Wyndham County.
oh, right.
Somewhere
Well, I just canceled that, though, because he took that slur, I mean, that big.
Maybe that's
We're
just
not-
a rite
we're
of
not
passage.
We're gonna meet at the business roundtable.
So somewhere.
We're gonna meet at the tech
Somewhere in
center.
Wyndham County.
And what's the date of that one?
The 20th of May.
20th.
Oh, he's organizing it?
Well, maybe you know,
My schedule may
Mark,
be
maybe you
wrong.
don't know this, what we typically do is we meet in the area or the school where the retiring student went to school, or is going to school.
He has to organize the meal, right?
Well, I mean, the last time we were at the Brattleboro High School was the best meal that this board has had.
Wow.
That
It
makes
was
it easy.
close to the Burlington one. Burlington was a close second.
Wasn't quite as good.
Anyway, so the May meeting is the 20th, it'll be in the Brattleboro area. The June retreat is the 24th and 25th.
That's the dates that
Okay.
work the best for the most.
Right.
Margaret is not available.
Yep.
She won't take
Moving along.
And Krista, you can come for part of the day?
Yeah, as soon as we know what's going on, I just have to let the program know that I'm working with. I might be staying at the museum.
Past practice has been for us to have, it would be Tuesday all day and Wednesday in the morning through lunch.
Okay, so half day on the
That's kind
25th.
of the, I don't know if you're going to stick with that, but.
Yeah. And we're thinking that we're gonna be meeting in the Burlington area. You don't have a site yet?
I have proposals from the Hilton and from Sheraton
Okay.
to see what.
If anyone living or working in the Burlington area has other suggestions, please feel free to give them to Carol.
Right, Hotel Vermont.
I was about to say that.
Can we go to Hotel Vermont?
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
I'm staying at UVM campus.
that-
Maybe
that's
everybody
the,
can stay on campus. See how you can stay in the dorms at UVM too. It's lovely.
I spent 4 years at UVM, I'm done.
Yeah, I don't need a preview.
Right.
Spent 5 years there and I only went 3 years.
Okay.
Were you a
anything
concentrator
else
or a
you want to bring up at
completer
the
or a
board meeting?
participant?
I was.
Carol, do you have anything you want to say?
Can I, I'm sorry.
Wait a minute.
A list of things for.
I want to, we're going to go to that after we adjourn, but I want to get everything else on the record.
Oh,
Stacy,
this
you have
is-
something?
This is a scheduling thing. It doesn't need to
Okay.
be on the record. That's fine.
Do you have anything you want to say to the board?
Yes, I guess you've opened the door.
No,
I am going to retire.
no.
Oh. I mean, congratulations.
Congratulations.
That's it.
Wow.
We don't agree with that last statement.
We can get you a window.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if you had a window.
Window.
This is all because of the window.
Because of the window.
Oh,
Might
Karen.
have pushed her over the edge.
I would do it for me.
You don't know half of it.
So, I mean, obviously, we're excited for you. And, you know, some of us know that retirement's a great time, but we're really going to
One
miss
of
you.
us.
And we're going to have a great party for you at the board retreat in June.
Oh, yeah. We will.
We must.
Yeah.
Down on the
I
waterfront? Aw.
really enjoyed, it's, you know, I have 27 years this round, plus 7 years before I quit after my second son was born. So it's been a long,
Wow.
journey. I've seen lots. But, you know, for 99% of the time, it's been enjoyable. And I enjoyed my work.
Great.
Great. Well,
People and the people that I work with.
well, at the celebration, we'll expect a much longer speech than that, but that was good.
That was the warm-up.
Yeah. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Seconded, and all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Coming in.
Now, remember, now that we've adjourned,
Yeah, it's-
we're done.
it's a really-
We'll talk about